Hello. Hi guys. Thank you for joining the live stream. I hope the audio is coming fine. Yeah, it seems fine. Yeah. First of all, let me tell you guys that today I'm going to discuss something at the beginning, which is sort of a rabbit hole that I went deep into, and after that we are going to get to the main topic. But it is related what we are going to discuss in the beginning. So I'll have to remind people that whoever joins later on, they also must check the live stream from the very beginning. And lots of comments already. Thanks a lot. Hi Tanya, Bishwajit Dash, linguist, Kshatriyified. He's saying, Dada, kemon acho? Onek din por live korcho. Yes, my sleep schedule went to hell again because I was now going to sleep in the evening and waking up in the middle of the night. That's why I couldn't do the live streams. I have been meaning to do this particular live stream, which we are going to do today, the paper we are going to discuss today specifically. I have been meaning to do this for the last 1 week almost. Volume increase mic volume. Yes, I think I know why. Yes, thank you for letting me know. So and big apologies for not doing the live streams for so many days. I really missed it, and this particular paper we are going to discuss is also very important. So first, let me show you all the things I've been looking into. Okay, so basically I have been for all these days I have been doing a deep dive of everything Ankit Shah has been saying, all the predictions, all the frameworks he's using to come to these conclusions. What is his thought process? And for that, my big help has been, of course, Satyology's entire playlist with Ankit Shah. Okay, do watch that. It's almost a great free geopolitics course. I would call it that, because see, who are the other geopolitics people we know? Sushant Sareen, Abhijit Ayar Mitra, Abhijit Chavra even to a large extent. Now, Sushant Sareen, Abhijit Ayar Mitra are trained people in geopolitics who are probably using a particular thought process. Okay, there's a particular why and how to the entire thing that they discuss. But we are not getting that, because when they're coming on podcasts or panel discussions in live events, they are just giving you information. Okay, that see, this is where this happened, this is where that happened, and now therefore this is happening. That is their analysis. Abhijit Chavra even is just telling you things. There is a big difference between information and knowledge. Okay, what is the difference? The difference is that when you are being taught something in a school, let's say, or in a college, if you are just taught a particular thing, then that kind of education is probably the first one that's going to go away, because now information is no more important for you don't have to go to the school to know something. You have to go to the school to learn something, because information is available on your mobile phone and Android and Google all the time. So when you go for knowledge seeking in a university or a college, that's when you are taught how to think, not what to think, and or not just giving you some notes and telling you, see, this is what happened. Now, the only one I see doing that in geopolitics, in the online space at least, is Ankit Shah. He's giving you a specific way of analyzing things. Okay, now in the end, or maybe years from now, we will know that he was hugely wrong, or he was largely right on some things, he was largely wrong on some things, or maybe he was mostly wrong. But if you want a framework of thinking, Ankit Shah is giving you that. Whereas Abhijit Chavra, Abhijit Ayar Mitra, Sushant Sareen, the information we are getting from them is just information. They are just doing the Google search for you, basically. You could have done that yourself. But Ankit Shah has a clear direction of thinking. For that, I'm more interested in Ankit Shah these days. But for that, for the entire Satyology playlist of Ankit Shah, that you should check out as a free geopolitics course. Even if these things don't come true in the end, for now, you'll get a lens to look at the world from. It's just not just a bunch of knowledge. Now, in that context, I was checking out some things that Ankit Shah keeps claiming. For that, I found there are some great papers even confirming what Ankit Shah is saying. Okay, based on which we are going to discuss a paper today written by a person called Jinendranath Mohanty and Sanjeev Kumar Mohanty. Actually, it's, in Bengali we always pronounce these Odia surnames as Mohanty only, but one of their surnames is spelt as Mahanti and one is Mohanty. So I'm not sure if they are related or not. Now, the paper is about how from 1971-72 onwards, with the rise of petrodollar, Islamic radicalization in the Indian subcontinent was funded, basically by the help of UAE and Saudi Arabia. And which is Ankit Shah's one of his main points, that see, we have always had radicalization. That is the main topic of research in India, Bharat, Pakistan. J.S.I. Deepak's book. That usually commies and liberals and seculars always say that, see, not all Muslims are bad, of course, and we all know not all Muslims are bad, but most Muslims are extremely good, patriotic, loving of Hindus, and there is a very fractional minority of Muslims who really want to kill people, and there's nothing, no such thing even written in Quran, etc. And therefore, the way to counter this is by just making them rich, just give them some money, and they will stop killing you, essentially. Which is also the Amartya Sen kind of view, that the very reason that any riot has ever happened, even Gandhiji's view, even Barkha view when she went to interview in Kashmir, that who is doing the riot? It's Muslims. Why? Because they are poor. Who was the riot against? Against landed Hindu communities. Okay, so landed meaning if you live in a flat and someone lives in a jhopri, you are somehow more vulnerable in front of that jhopri wala, because you live in a flat. That's a little bit more richer. Okay, therefore that jhopri wala killed you. Now that's obviously not true. Then is that similar to Ankit Shah's view when he is saying that see, this radicalization happened because of petrodollar, and when de-dollarization happens, when crude oil supply ends in 15-20 years, when UAE and Saudi Arabia move on from these petrodollar things, and therefore the way to diversify their economy is by diversifying their entire country, culturally even, and thus moving away from radicalization. That's also going to lead to de-radicalization in India. Then is Ankit Shah saying the same thing as Amartya Sen? Not entirely. First of all, what Amartya Sen is missing out on, or his kind of view, that just make people rich and therefore they won't do terrorism, they are always missing out on one thing, that it is Hindus, poor Hindus, who don't do terrorism or violent things against people of other religions, even when they are dirt poor. That is because our fundamentals are different. Even if we become fundamentalist Hindus, we do completely different things because our fundamentals are different. So in Hindus case, the radicalization never even happens, even with or without funding. Okay, now what's the problem on that side? The problem on that side is that there is a source that yes, these are the things you must do against Hindus, and on top of that, how many people really want to pursue that? Okay, there are things that every group wants to pursue in some way or the other. Okay, for example, even before the recent elections, I was saying that just go sit on the roads to call for the end of Waqf board, or to end the government stronghold on Hindu temples. All that can be ended if you just sit on the roads. Now, none of us really sat on the roads because we have other things to do. But then who is going to fund you for sitting on the roads? Someone has to fund them. There might be 5-10 Hindus who really believe in that that issue to such an extent that they will quit their jobs and sit on the roads. But a large mass is not going to do that. That is Ankit Shah's argument with the Islamic radicalization issue as well. That yes, there is a source in the book telling you to kill kafirs. There is a small group of people who will do this regardless of any economics. But this mass occupation of doing radical things, that is happening because of petrodollar. And that is Ankit Shah's prediction, that it has started after 71. And while researching that, you will see that the dates match up to a lot of other interesting things as well. Okay, there's some issues of eugenics, feminism, breaking down of the family. Okay, all of that is associated in some way or the other with this entire timeline. So the timeline being presented by Ankit Shah is that in 1971, US President Nixon says that dollar is no longer going to be associated with the gold. Okay, we are going to take it off the gold standard, and that's when they get the freedom to print as many dollars as they want. And that leads to inflation from here to eternity, and everyone becomes magically richer without creating real value. And whoever does not jump on that train gets left behind. We did not jump on that train, obviously, and we did not even do free market to any extent in India. So neither did we do innovation, neither did we jump on the dollar train. So our GDP growth rate remained 1%, 1.1%, whereas inflation went on with 5, 6%, 7%, 8%, 10%, all these years. Now, after in 71, when Nixon takes the dollar out of the gold standard, after that, the next thing that they do is go to Saudi Arabia and tell them that, see, we are going to take care of your security, and therefore and we are and everyone is going to buy more and more cars, and more petrol is going to be consumed. All that's going to come from you only. So uh, why don't we have a friendship, and we use dollar to keep the to fund the conflicts here and there which are already existing, and for that they need dollars anyway. Like the day we were discussing Laura Loomer's interview, basically debate with Dave Smith, the libertarian, about why the Israel-Palestine issue has gone on for all these years. That's when we kind of stumbled upon it. That okay, US has ended so many civilizations and countries just because they wanted oil, or because some of them wanted de-dollarization, like Libya and Iraq. Palestine, such a small state, and Israel, their great friend, so many rich Jews in USA. Why aren't they ending the Palestine situation? Why not just eliminate Palestine from the face of the earth? Why hasn't USA done that? There lies the answer, which kind of adds up to what Ankit Shah is saying, that they wanted these problems to go on. POK, Taiwan, China, Iran, Israel, Israel, Palestine, all that is going to now end according to Ankit Shah. But the other thing that happens when Saudi Arabia becomes richer and richer and richer because of the petrodollar, that's when they decide to now let's pursue more radicalization in the Indian subcontinent. Because during 1945 to 71, a lot of people were still very much alive to the radicalization problem, because the people who had seen partition with their own eyes were still all around. Freedom fighters were still all around. Okay, the Congressy freedom fighters, the radicals of the Congress, all of them were around in the 70s. So they had much more. They were at least kind of more mentally prepared to counter radicalization, and which is why radicalization had not taken the shape we are seeing today. And in terms of basic, even clothes, etc. Okay, even when I was growing up, or in the movies that we see from the times that we weren't born, we see that Muslims of any place in India wore the local dresses. Okay, a Bengali Muslim would wear sari, pajama, Punjabi like any Bengali. Okay, Marathi Muslims would. I've seen that they wore normal shirt pant only. Okay, in Bangladesh mainly, almost everyone. Okay, anyone who is even remotely in the public eye, all of them always wore normal Bengali clothes. Okay, but in the last 10 years, especially, mainly in the last 10 years, last 10, 15 years, I've started to notice that no, everyone seems to be like they are from Saudi Arabia, direct import hoke aaya hai abhi abhi. That Ankit Shah is tracking to 1973 onwards, when petrodollar starts funding radicalization here. That is what he's saying is has funded the things like even um, the properties owned by Muslims on both sides of national highways in the entire country. That has happened after 73, because that's how you need to choke the highways whenever you want to protest and demand something. Then black burqas. Before that, there were no black burqas, because black burqa signifies a very Saudi style. Then Muslim men wearing just the Islamic topi, their Islamic clothes, and long beards. Now these things are common everywhere in India, especially even in Kolkata, where I had never seen these things before. In Bangladesh, it's common now. Bangladesh is getting more and more radicalized every day, with of course a lot of US funding even these days. Now, to confirm that, I found a paper which we are going to discuss today, and before that, we are going to discuss something even crazier, which is sort of a rabbit hole of research I went into. Okay, check that out. Okay, let me check some just let me just check some comments. बहुत दिन बाद लाइव स्ट्रीम करने का ये एक प्रॉब्लम है कि स्टैमरिंग ज़्यादा होता है. नमस्कार माय भाई बोन्स, लेट जिहाद করবেন না. Okay, I think I need to turn the chat into live chat. Okay. Yeah. So you know the live stream has started, right? There were Tabligh movements to Islamize Bengali, Hindu, Bharatiya Muslims into Arabic culture. Yes. But can you give the timeline? Is it after 73 mainly? Yes, that black burqa nowadays are everywhere. Yes. And I had never seen these things before, like even when I was young. What is worse, Bard and Chat GPT comes up with names of authors and research papers which doesn't even exist. They just make them up somehow. They are like us. We are also making up things in test. Bishwajit in Bengal, it was Barelvis. Yeah, but uh, that radicalization culminated into the partition. After the partition, their assimilation was countered with petrodollar. Okay, let's show you guys what all I found. Okay. First of all, see one thing. See this US GDP. Okay. When does US GDP really take off? See, from 1970 onwards. Look at from 1960 to 70. Okay. There was almost no GDP growth. See, from 71 onwards, when they take the dollar off the gold standard, that's when their GDP shoots up. Okay. This is China's GDP. This is after their deals here and there with the local regional parties of every country, with Congress, etc. That's when their GDP shoots up really high. Okay. Now this is the first one. This is this is when I was checking out and confirming basically Ankit Shah's idea of USA asking China to take up the one child policy. Okay, what were the ideas behind that? What was the thought process behind that? That's what I wanted to check here. So see, this is a paper from 1988 as far as I remember. Yes, 1988. Okay, so they were already beginning to see the problems with that policy. So this paper is called, this is a 37-page paper, so we can't get into this fully. The United States, China and the United Nations Population Fund, Dynamics of USA Policy Making. Okay, this is very interesting. Check out just the abstract and introduction parts. Okay, in the mid 1960s. Okay, remember 60s as a decade is very important. What was going on in USA in the 60s? That is the birth of feminism, LGBTQ, and all of that got galvanized because of the anti-war protests. Okay, because that's when they were going into Vietnam. People were protesting against it, that there's no real reason why the fuck are you going to do a war in a random country, and they all join hands with the people who are also in favor of socially liberal and commie policies. So, mysteriously, in the mid 60s, the US government assumed leadership of an international movement to encourage developing countries to adopt policies to reduce population growth. Now, what are the thought processes behind coming up with this idea that population is growing too much? We need to increase, we need to decrease it. For that, we will get into some other stuff that I stumbled upon while going into this rabbit hole. Okay, reduce population growth. Toward this end, the United States elicited the participation of other Western donor nations and sought to mobilize the influence of the United Nations system. Mobilize, okay, mobilize the United Nations. Because UN agencies showed no great interest in population policy issues, the US government sought to involve them by channeling additional sources through a program, the UNFPA. Created in 1969, it takes them 9 years basically to convince them. Created in 1969, when the ideas of antinatalism, population being too high, Malthusian model, feminism, sexual liberation, sexual revolution, all that is at its peak. That is when the fund has grown to become the, created in 1969, the fund has now in 1988, when this paper is being written, the fund has grown to become the second largest donor of international population assistance. Population assistance meaning population reduction. Population assistance after the United States itself, providing support through other agencies, as well as direct funding to projects in over 140 countries. By the early 1980s, it had considerably broadened its base of political support and lessened its financial dependence on the United States. Now it's becoming independent, that organization, UNFPA. While US officials were often critical of UNFPA for not devoting enough effort to promoting family planning, they were pleased by the fund's contribution to growing awareness in developing countries of their population problems. Now, what is this awareness in developing countries of their population problems? Who listen to these? Okay, that there is an awareness required to decrease population. In India, only Hindus will listen to it. And what were what did those awareness campaigns look like? Those awareness campaigns were what we today know as wokeism. That is the awareness they're talking about. Okay, that is the awareness they had to sell. That, see, if you have less kids, you can work, you can have financial independence, you can have sexual independence, and there's not much burden on your country, etc. Therefore, don't have kids. That is the source of these ideas. Wait, let me just check the comment section here, and let me turn on the comments from my phone, okay? Because I have two monitors, and on one of them this is running, so I can't figure out if there's any problem with the chat or something. So I'll just turn the chat on from here, from my phone. Dada, did you take the red pill? No. Thanks. Yeah, I can see the chat now here. Hindus in 1960 were actually pretty. Again, I can't see the rest of the sentence because were actually pretty dumb. Okay, now see what they do in 1979. That is the main point of this paper. In a radical departure from past policy, the US government decided in 1985 to withhold all contribution from UNFPA. Okay, अचानक 1985 में जाके बोल रहा है कि हम नहीं देंगे तुमको पैसा. Why? Effectively terminating its formal participation in the organization. So US's participation in the organization ends in 1985 all of a sudden. Ironically, the reason for the US action was not disappointment with UNFPA's performance in supporting the reduction of population growth, okay? Instead, US officials stated that their government could no longer contribute to UNFPA because of its assistance to the National Population Program of China. They argued that implementation of the one-child policy adopted by China in 1979 was responsible for forced abortions and sterilizations that had been reported by both Chinese and foreign sources. So, US tells UN that कुछ करो, सबको समझाओ कि population खराब चीज़ है. UN does that, and because of that policy being followed in China, because it's a dictatorial system, there's no conversation going to go on, there's no social churn, there's no social awakening. The dictator decides that okay, यूएसए ने बोला है pollution कम करना बहुत बढ़िया बात है, तो चलो कल ही से pollution कम कर देंगे. So one fine morning they do it, and again with dictatorial policies, and therefore they do forced abortions, etc. Because no fucking way can you ever have another child after the first one now, because I have decided as a dictator. That is the problem with dictatorial systems. Coercion is still evident in the implementation of the policy, and because of that embarrassment, USA decides that okay, no, we are not going to fund this anymore. Hilariously, that the UNFPA was so successful in convincing China that population is bad, population reduction needs to happen, that USA in fact got embarrassed that no, this is too much. Okay, so you never know what your second order consequences are, what your unintended consequences are of any plan or any trajectory. Okay, so that is the one thing we always need to be wary of while discussing Ankit Shah's predictions as well, that what if all this goes to hell, or what if one or two things happen in his list of predictions and that leads to other unintended consequences which stop the other things from happening. For example, what he's predicting that lots of IT jobs are going to go away, or at least people are going to get fired for a while in 2024, 25, 26, in this period. What if that gives rise to even further communist ideologies or preferences for communist parties in India? Those sorts of things. But of course, who's going to fund them? That's a different question. Next is this particular thing. So I thought, since it's all going on in the 1960s, let's check out the pill, okay? The ideas of abortion, or even pills, birth control pills. Who were the people behind that? Then I remembered some things which I knew many years back. I forgot. So check out this roots of the pill. This is not a right-wing foundation or a website. Okay, these people are in favor of women killing babies. One of the early female graduates of the MIT, Catherine McCormick, believed in science and in the advancement of women. Margaret Sanger witnessed unwanted pregnancies and desperate abortion attempts when she worked as a nurse among New York's poorest women. Though they came from different worlds, the two women set out to improve women's lives through birth control, a phrase Margaret Sanger herself coined, okay? She came up with this term, birth control. Now see who Margaret Sanger is, okay? Can you see this? First, let's see her view on eugenics. After World War I, Margaret Sanger increasingly posited a societal need to limit births by those least able to afford children. Again, this idea which leads people to believing in antinatalism even today, that poor people should not give birth to children. Okay, if they are poor, they should remain childless, because magically, since they don't understand economics, even ABCD of economics, they think that there is going to be a time, or in an ideal world there can be no poor people, but since there will always be poor people, someone or the other has to stop having babies because they can't, quote unquote, afford to have kids. Okay, so the affluent and educated already limited their childbearing, while the poor and uneducated lacked access to contraception and information about birth control. So you see, this is sort of a circular argument, that the premise being that contraception is good, birth control is good. First they said that that is the standard that has been propagated. After that they say, since poor people are so poor that they can't afford contraception and birth control, therefore their births need to be limited, because they can't afford these brilliant things which we claimed 5 minutes back were brilliant in the first place. Okay, hilarious. What a great marketing strategy. Here she found an area of overlap with eugenicists. This is the most important part. She believed that they both sought to, quote unquote, assist the race towards the elimination of the unfit. Okay, the unfit races should not have kids, meaning black people. She distinguished herself from other eugenicists by writing that eugenicists imply or insist that a woman's first duty is to the state. We contend that her duty to herself is her duty to the state. We maintain that a woman possessing an adequate knowledge of her reproductive functions is the best judge of the time and conditions under which her child should be brought into the world. We further maintain that it is her... Okay, this is a long apologia. I want to learn about her eugenicist views. Sanger was a proponent of negative eugenics, which aimed to improve human hereditary traits through social intervention by reducing the reproduction of those who were considered unfit. Okay, black people again. Now, this is when anthropology was entirely eugenicist. Okay, the birth of anthropology was during these times. In 1916, Planned Parenthood, the famous, infamous abortion organization of USA, which now has their offices, or their basically doctoral chambers in mainly black neighborhoods. Now they say they have it in black neighborhoods again, because black people, as poor, as the most poorest in the section of US population, they don't have access to these things, birth control, etc., which we claimed in the first place that were a thing to pursue. We made it the aspirational model, and now black people can't afford it. So let's have Planned Parenthood abortion clinics in black neighborhoods mainly. Now the interesting part is, now they are saying that they have it in black neighborhoods because black people don't have access to these things. But also it's at the same time, parallelly, black neighborhoods, Planned Parenthood is causing black neighborhoods to create more and more single mothers. It's incentivizing breaking up of families because of affirmative action, etc. Women getting a lot of free money if they are single, or if they are divorced, if the husband is not in the house, etc. So basically the family system has been absolutely destroyed in black neighborhoods. But interestingly, those Planned Parenthood people like Margaret Sanger, they first of all, in the earliest days of Planned Parenthood, they put these offices of Planned Parenthood in black neighborhoods because they wanted to reduce the population of black people specifically. Okay, so now they are saying that no, it's for a different reason, but the main work of Planned Parenthood is going on in the same area only, with the same people. So in the end, the result is same. Okay, so that is kind of similar to how our social sciences work. While trying to end casteism, they incidentally keep increasing casteism, or go on rigidifying the caste boundaries. People are more pissed off with the other caste after all these 75-80 years of us mainly the upper caste, middle class, funding the fuck out of their salaries these social science syllabuses, which are going on pretending to critique casteism. But their problem is that they won't be able to end casteism because these boundaries, these syllabuses, these frameworks of thinking were created by people who did not want to end casteism, who rigidified casteism, who made the boundaries of casteism stronger, and they thought it's going to be beneficial for their rule. So you should not be surprised if their descendants, who now claim to not believe in those things, but reach the same conclusion, reach the same results, which is casteism is not going away, not at least because of their efforts. Their efforts are based on principles created by people who did not want casteism to go away. In the same way, Planned Parenthood wanted to kill black babies even in 1916. They are doing so even today, but for a different noble reason. That's the hilarious part. Okay. Next is this insane guy called Sanger's view of eugenics was influenced by Havelock Ellis and other British eugenicists. Okay. Now see who is Havelock Ellis. This is insane. Yeah, check this out. This is sort of a what happened here? This is American Psychological Association, okay? The most woke agency in the world. Where did the article go, bhai? Acha, ruko. Article hi gayab ho gaya. I hope this comes back from here. Yeah. Transgenderism and the concept of gender. Mysteriously, all the things that decrease population are coming up one after the other, okay? So, this is a paper from the year 2000, okay? We'll just read the abstract for a very particular reason. Transgenderism and the concept of gender. This paper discusses the history of transgenderism and the concept of gender. Transgender was first researched by Magnus Hirschfeld in 1868 to 1935 and Havelock Ellis, who was one of the main inspirations of Margaret Sanger, who was an eugenicist and believed in killing black people. And this Havelock Ellis guy, let's see what his views are. Few immediately followed up on their pioneering work, and most of them who did were psychiatrists. Freudian theories remained dominant in the US. It was the Christine Jorgensen case which gave renewed impetus to the study of transgendered individuals, and Harry Benjamin was particularly influential. The concept of gender as distinct from sex was developed by John Money and popularized by the second wave of feminists. And those of you who are followers of my channel know who John Money is. This is the guy on whom we did a live stream reaction when he was being discussed on Jordan Peterson's podcast by another famous doctor. John Money was a guy who randomly conjured up transgenderism out of thin air. He, a very poor couple in USA, one of their kids' penis got burnt off or something, okay? So they took him to John Money. John Money was trying to come up with a conclusive theory to say that yes, transgenderism does exist. Sex is not the same as gender, which we now commonly hear from these people. How that came about? That was because of John Money. So John Money says that yes, let's amputate that kid's penis and let's turn him into a girl, and we are going to do a big experiment. We are going to fund you. The family was very poor. They were basically preyed upon by John Money, and then they were raised as one guy was they were two boys. One of them was raised as the sister of the other guy, okay, and then they grew up. Later on, the girl found that no, I kind of feel like I'm a guy. She had countless problems in her school. You can watch that in my live stream only. But after that, in the end, what happens is they both kill themselves. Okay, that was the end result. But when John Money writes this paper, it's lapped up by liberals of the entire country in USA. They say, "Wow, see now this is the next civil rights. We need to speak up for transgender people because sex is not the same as gender." Now that has gone mainstream attraction, that idea. But John Money's paper was debunked by his own main those two kids, on whom that experiment was based, on whom that research was based. They grew up and said that John Money was absolutely bogus. This idea is completely bogus. No one listened to them by then. By then, The paper had been peer reviewed and accepted by the liberal arts academia, psychology academia, APA, everyone. So no one now knows that the very basis of claiming that sex and gender are not associated was created by a fraud. It's a completely fraud movement. Okay. But my point is that behind this idea was one guy, John Money, who was a complete fraud. The other guy was Havelock Ellis, who was an eugenicist, who wanted black people or unfit people to die. Okay. Next is, yeah, check out this guy. Havelock Ellis's views on eugenics. Okay. Ellis was a supporter of eugenics. He served as vice president to the Eugenics Education Society and wrote on this subject, among others, in the task of social hygiene. Okay. Eventually, it seems evident a general system, whether private or public, whereby all personal facts, biological and mental, normal and morbid, are duly and systematically registered, must become inevitable if we are to have a real guide as to those persons who are most fit or most unfit to carry on the race. The superficially sympathetic man flings a coin to the beggar. Listen to this sentence. This is the creepiest sentence you've heard in all week, okay? I guarantee. The superficially sympathetic man flings a coin to the beggar. The more deeply sympathetic man builds an almshouse for him. So he does not need to beg any longer. But perhaps the most radically sympathetic man of all is the man who arranges that the beggar shall not be born. What kind of economics knowledge is this, first of all? Secondly, you see, without even knowing it, he is bringing in the Abrahamic sympathy angle to this entire thing. This is an Abrahamic view, unfortunately. It's completely based on sympathy, sympathy, sympathy. He gives you 3 different kinds of sympathies. One sympathetic man gives a coin to a beggar, even though they should not, because then it incentivizes the profession of begging. Secondly, a more sympathetic man builds an almshouse, okay, where people just donate and you can go and get free stuff. And the most sympathetic man is who doesn't even let the beggar be born. If you are in a poor family, you should not be born. Okay, that's this guy's idea, who was one of the fathers of the idea of transgenderism, all of whom wanted to decrease the population. So it's no wonder that wokeism leads to decreased populations everywhere. And they mysteriously support and fund all ideas like LGBTQ, transgenderism, or antinatalism, all of which decreases population. So the funding behind these movements is a big suspect. Okay, next check out this. Okay, now in 1960, the FDA, Food and Drug Administration of USA, they approved the sale of Enovid for use as an oral contraceptive. It was manufactured by GD Skill, but it was mainly done with that McCormick woman we read. She was one of the first early funders of this research. Okay. Now, what else happens in 1965? India and Pakistan go to war. The head of Pakistan, the president of Pakistan back then is General Ayub Khan. And during Ayub Khan's presidency, there was something interesting going on in Pakistan, okay? This is all in trajectory, that what all happened in the 60s, what all happened in the 70s, okay? Check this out. This is Ayub Khan with Lal Bahadur Shastri. Famously, after Lal Bahadur Shastri was mysteriously killed, Ayub Khan had said that he was the only one who could have brought India and Pakistan together, and that guy got killed. Okay, Indian Prime Minister got killed because he was apparently the one guy who could have resolved the India-Pakistan conflict. Again, we know that conflicts need to go on for US success, but this was in 1965, so it was before they had gotten off the gold standard. But I want to show you something different. What Ayub Khan did. Look at Pakistan's GDP growth rate. Okay. Ayub Khan was sort of a more secular, sort of a more liberal guy, okay, by Pakistan standards. And he had obviously pissed off many more radical Islamic people in Pakistan, which is why he got ousted, and then General Yahya came and 71 war happened. But this guy kind of had brought a sort of more freer market policy in Pakistan. Okay, so now see, under him, where does the GDP growth rate go? Why isn't the mouse working today here? Okay, usually this works. This is in 1965. Okay, this portion, that's when their GDP growth rate in Pakistan in 1965, okay, right before and after the war, you won't believe how much it was. It was 10.8% or 10.5%. We haven't touched 10.8%, 10.5% even today. That's what Pakistan's GDP growth rate had gone under General Ayub Khan. So you see, free market can work everywhere, no matter what the population. Guess what was India's GDP growth rate in that same year? When Pakistan's GDP growth rate was 10.5%, India's GDP growth rate was minus 2%, a little more than minus 2%, minus 2.5 or 2.6 something. Okay, that's how great socialism is. That's how great Nehru's policies were. That's how great PC Maulanobish's policies were. Okay, now thank God Sanjeev Sanyal is rectifying all that harm done by the Bengali guy. Now, minus 2.5 GDP growth rate means it shrunk. Our GDP did not even grow. First of all, inflation is all the time going on because of printing money. We not only were not keeping up with inflation, we were shrinking instead. Okay, that's how great our economic policies were. Okay, now we start the paper. So this is the interesting paper, which is basically confirming what Ankit Shah is saying. This is a paper from 2010. Okay, and before that, let me just check some comments. रेट माइनस में भी जाता है या हमारा बहुत बार गया है. इंडिया का 2-3 बार ऐसा हुआ है कि जीडीपी ग्रोथ रेट माइनस में चला गया है, व्हिच मींस द जीडीपी इंस्टेड वेंट स्मॉलर. लोहा लोहे को काटता है और बंगाली बंगाली को. What are they discussing? Marxism mindset has penetrated WRT feminism in the BJP support base too. Yes, they are fully in favor of all those things. I stopped reading after Get a Girl. Hindu communities with strong family bonds will survive only. Such families exist today. Chota paribar wala Hindus in urban areas will suffer. Yes, and the Bengali liberal will go extinct in a few years. Now let's discuss this paper. This is a very fascinating paper. I've read a bit of it. It's very fascinating. And now the timeline is important. Okay, if everything Ankit Shah is saying is true, if everything said in this paper is the only thing that's true, then in 1973, when after petrodollar starts funding Islamic radicalism in the Indian subcontinent, that's when something else happens in Bollywood. That's not mentioned here, but you can do 2 and 2 is equal to 4. That's when Bollywood mainly accepts scripts from a couple called Salim Javed. Salim Javed start putting in the fun things we know about Bollywood today because of that Twitter handle. Amitabh is going around wearing 786. Amitabh is breaking idols, etc. Atheism is great. God is not helping you anywhere. Urdu poetry, Urdu shairi is the aspirational model all of a sudden. Your pronunciation of kh versus khushbu, all that is glorified after mysteriously these things. And that's when we know Pakistan's ISI, etc., or the Bollywood underworld, who were in cahoots with the Pakistan ISI, they were funding so many films. And not mysteriously, therefore, we have 3 biggest heroes who were Muslims. Now, all of those 3 people might not even know these things. They might not be fundamentalists, but they were propped up. It's no mystery that after 70s, all of a sudden, Bollywood becomes the main washing machine for Islamic radicalism. All of a sudden we get these ideas which we had concluded basically up until the 60s and 70s that no, that is not the case. Because again, the people who have faced partition are still alive. In the 70s, we again start to learn, especially in the late 70s, 80s onwards, that yes, not all Muslims are bad, but mainly Muslims are great. And so many Muslims are great artists, etc. Because so many of them get propped up with underworld funding, ISI and petrodollar. Probably that is the case. 2010. Okay, now check out this paper. Since the 1970s, the Military-Madrasa-Mullah complex in Pakistan has nurtured a relationship that has transformed Islam into a fundamentalist creed which has spawned a militant brand of Islam to fight its existential enemies. In the absence of competing ideologies and by confusing religiosity with religion, the Islamist radicals are emotionally tempted towards the ideological appeals of extremism. The political use of religion, or Islam in this case, in terms of jihad to fight the Soviets, was a primary factor in militarizing the Pakistani society. The jihadis, in an effort to take Islam back to its pristine glory, have transformed the rhetoric of jihad into actual violence through promotion of Islamic terror. With least commitment to the existing social order, these Islamists, with their politics of extremism, have defamed Islam in general, and Pakistan in particular. You may or may not agree with these statements. Unfortunately, Pakistan has chosen to base its identity on its religion to the neglect of all other aspects, which also contribute to national identity. Religion can be the only thing that contributes to national identity. The perception has been that religion is the only basis of nationality and there is nothing which is of a greater cohesive force. And they do have this problem because other than Islam, there is actually no cohesive force in Pakistan. It was created out of a thin air with a lot of people who are not at all good friends with each other. So therefore they needed Islam as the unifying force of Pakistan. Pakistan's difficulties in establishing a national identity remained the same while since the 1970s the country has experienced a shift from official Islam to Islamism. It is the conviction of the moral superiority of the Islam that determines their political action. The tragedy of Pakistan stems from getting bogged into Islamic fundamentalism, a post-Cold War phenomenon. Now, a lot of premises are very questionable here. The scholar who has written or the people who believe in this seem to ignore the fact that it was created in the first place because of Islamic fundamentalism. I don't see why they keep missing that. There may have been a gap between 45 and the 70s, but it was the start of it was for that very reason. Again, that's the same way of things occurring. Okay, you created a particular thing for a very specific reason. After that, no matter what formula you put into that, that thing is going to give you the same results. Which is why a stable Pakistan is not in our best interest. The origin of the present wave of Islamic fundamentalism. Yeah, now it gets more specific. We know there were previous waves of Islamic fundamentalism. What is the present wave of Islamic fundamentalism? What are the causes and fundings behind that? That can be traced back to the skullduggery of the Cold War, the Islamic revivalism of the late 1970s, and the rise of Khomeini in Iran. Ayatollah Khomeini, the fall of the Shah Pahlavi, the previous sort of secular king in Iran, the fall of that guy, the fall of Shah's secular regime in Iran, and the return to the religious values of Islam boosted the self-confidence of the Islamic world. And they thought that, see, we have this thing called crude oil, which is in demand everywhere, and that might be our God's boon on us. Okay, therefore be proud of yourself and let's fund this idea everywhere because we are so rich. We got rich because of the oil given to us by God. The origin of the present wave of Islamic radicalization, fundamentalism, can be traced back to the skullduggery of the Cold War, self-confidence of the Islamic world. Arab petrodollars also boosted the self-confidence of the Islamic world. The energy crisis of the 1970s and the subsequent upheaval in oil prices created a flow of billions of dollars from Saudi Arabia to fund the revival of the Islamic religion throughout the Islamic world. Enormous oil revenues provided the means to spread Wahhabism throughout the Middle East, shaping Islam in countries which has long tradition of syncretic values. By the 1980s, Islam had come on the center stage as a powerful political and religious force, affecting all elements of the population in Pakistan. And no wonder USA tried to be good friends with Pakistan because they thought that after all they are also Muslim, Saudi Arabia, Middle East is also Muslim, so if these people are friends with each other, maybe we need to have great relations with Pakistan if we want cheap oil from Saudi Arabia. This development provided the military establishment of Pakistan.
They got the opportunity not only to provide patronage to religious groups, but also develop an institutional linkage that lent legitimacy to its functioning. During the process of Islamization, Zia-ul Haq picked up the mullahs as his power base, and since then, the military-madrasa-mullah nexus developed. Religious education and training for jihad became complementary, portraying jihad as a tool to achieve a higher goal and glory for Islam. Islamic sentiment in Pakistan has been instrumentalized by waging the jihad in Afghanistan and Kashmir. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan was a key factor in strengthening the alliance between the mullahs and the military. The alliance made a major drift towards Islamic fundamentalism in Pakistan. The rise of fundamentalism in Pakistan poses a serious threat to its pluralistic social order. अब पाकिस्तान का क्या pluralistic social order है यही जानता है मगर कुछ होगा. They are probably talking about the internal conflicts of different cultures inside Pakistan. That is maybe their pluralistic social order. The atavistic desire of the Islamists to go back to the Islamic basics has distorted the liberal and progressive manifestations of the Pakistani identity. I have no idea what he's talking about. What is the liberal and progressive manifestation of the Pakistani identity? Why was it born in the first place if it had liberal and progressive manifestations? So again, we'll have to ignore the absolute liberal congressy ideas of Pakistan and focus on just what his findings are regarding the post 70s Islamic radicalization funding. Okay, we'll have to ignore his other views. The faith-based revival of Islam has transformed the ideology of jihad into actual violence, giving inevitable expansion to the radical fringe within the global Muslim community. Jihad culture is now deeply woven into Pakistan's national fabric. The religious extremists have their own brand of fanaticism, anchored less in the absolutism of pure faith than in the geopolitics of hate. West's newfound hostility towards the revivalist cause has in fact given a new opportunity for the promotion of moderate Islam in the face of a more organized and vocal minority expressing animus against liberal and democratic values. This is why I say radicals के बिना moderates को कोई भाव नहीं देगा. Islam takes center stage. Pakistan was intrinsically linked with Islam from the outset. Yes, its short history has been one of struggle between religious parties seeking to impose the corpus of religious law Sharia and secular parties more interested in socialist policies or regional issues. In fact, Jinnah toyed with the idea of a secular state during the Pakistan movement 1940-47, but in the end used Islam's powerful appeal to attract masses to his Muslim League and to the idea of establishing a separate Muslim state. The 1940s galvanized the Muslim masses to seek a separate state in South Asia, and central to the politics for that period of the Muslims was the question of an Islamic identity and assertion of Muslim nationalism. Quote, Pakistan as a seceding state did not have an ingrained nationality, and after independence, Pakistan used Islam as a unifying factor within the state and mobilized people for carrying out the task of nation building. Establishing Islam as the state ideology was a device aimed at defining a Pakistani identity during the formative years. Of course, in Pakistan, Islam as an ideology has been a far more effective basis for mass mobilization than nationalistic appeals. And on the other hand, we did secularism as a religion. Secularism was our religion till the early 1970s, which is why it's very European. European secularism, not even to the full definition of the word, sort of a distortion of European secularism was our religion, our state religion for all these years. Till the early 1970s, modernist, quasi-secular policies dominated the more traditional religious elements within the country. This is correct. This is what we were talking about. That in 1965-64, Pakistan's GDP growth rate had touched 10.5%. Domestic policies generally reflected little of Islam as an ideology. Okay, so his argument here is that it might be true that Pakistan was created because of an Islamic identity, but that was not all Pakistan was about up until the 70s. That changed after 70s. Two successive constitutions of 1956 and 62 had clearly avoided the implementation of Islamic ideology. Okay, and maybe that's why their GDP growth rate had shot up, because they were doing a free market economy basically. The Ayub Khan regime propounded the ideology of modernization and economic development. Now see when it changes. Okay, My chat is frozen here. Let me just refresh. I am not sure if anyone's commenting or if the audio is coming fine, etc. What is the author talking about? Which secular parties? Yes. Okay. Now see when the clash begins. The Ayub Khan regime propounded this. Yeah. The first clash between the ulema, who were the religious scholars, and the military took place over the constitution declaring Pakistan a republic instead of an Islamic republic. Okay. This is when they got pissed off with General Ayub Khan. He said, "We are just a republic, not an Islamic republic." So you see, Ayub Khan was kind of a secular modernist, almost a free market guy. He was their Milton Friedman apparently. The trend towards Islamization picked up once General Ayub Khan was forced to resign. General Yahya Khan's regime prescribed a fundamental role to Islamic ideology through the Legal Framework Order (LFO), and Islamic elements were promoted during his tenure. But the Bhutto regime sought legitimacy through the support of populism and socialism. Islamic ideology entered Bhutto's secular party when he turned to Islam to justify his unpopular rule and salvage his flagging socialist policies in the mid 1970s. Wow, wow, wow. So, he does socialism. Bhutto does socialism. Socialism fails. Now he brings in Islam to justify his socialism policies. Okay, this is what even would have been approved by the Quran. That's why we are doing socialism. That was Bhutto's argument. Interesting and creepy, evil. Islam has always been significant in the political debate after Pakistan's creation, and see, that's going to repeatedly happen everywhere. In India, when socialism failed, we had all sorts of justifications that we are not doing real socialism. Okay, now the justification is that socialism failed West Bengal. West Bengal became poorer. That needs to be blamed on non-Bengali Gujarati businessmen, Marwari businessmen. Okay, that's why we are poor. Or the center is not giving you enough money. The Gujarati in the center is not giving you enough money. That's why you are poor. So you see, first socialism is going to be applied with false promises. Then it is going to inevitably fail. Then even more excuses are going to come in to justify why socialism was brought in the first place. What a fucking creepy political circle. Islam has always been significant in the political debate after Pakistan's creation. The Constituent Assembly debate on Islam as an ideology points to this fact. For example, Maududi and Jamaat-e-Islami played the central part in the demand for an Islamic state and demanded an unequivocal declaration by the Assembly affirming the supremacy of Islamic law as the basic law of Pakistan. Islam was at the heart of political struggle for the creation of Pakistan and has remained at the center of post-independence political discourse. In 1973, socialist Bhutto, under pressure from fundamentalists, made Islam the state religion. The seemingly implausible resurgence of Islam in lieu of socialism during the Bhutto era meant the total victory of Islam and confirmed its central role in Pakistani politics. Though General Yahya Khan focused on the military's role as the defender of the ideological frontiers of Pakistan, it was in General Zia's period, who was a socialist secular, it was in his period that an ideological component was added to the role of the army. Army का ideological role बना दिया किसने? जो कि socialist और secular था. Just a blanket power hungry fucker. That's the only thing we can say about General Zia here. Because he did not stick to any of his ideologies. He did not remain socialist. He did not remain secular. He was not Islamic radical to begin with. He turned into that just because he could stay in power. What a bad person. What a bad human being. And then he adds the ideological component to the role of army. As far as the internal sociology goes, the army sees itself as an indigenous and Islamic force. Army's Islamic character, Pakistan Army's Islamic character emanates from its conservative ideological leanings, while its indigenous character is reflected through Islam, which represents native culture. पाकिस्तान का नेटिव कल्चर है उसका पाकिस्तानी आर्मी apparently. During the Zia regime, the composition of the army cadre was changed at the expense of the urbanized. Wow. The composition of the army cadre was changed at the expense of the urbanized, westernized looking middle class and upper class elite, and presence in offers and preference
in officers' commissions was given to the emerging rural educated generation with strong leaning towards conservative Islam. The army officers were taught that Islam was integral to the ideology of the army. The army was ideologically reformed. Prior to that, the Pakistani army used to project a moderate and liberal force of Islam. Middle-level officers commissioned during Zia period who came from more traditional backgrounds, compared to top military officers who stem from the elite, were culturally more sympathetic to the Islamization campaign and shared the religious zeal of the fundamentalists. The army still entertains the ideological and disciplinary values of Islam as the basis of national ethical behavior. But Stephen Cohen believes that the Pakistani army is not Islamized, although its officers and men reflect the devout qualities of Pakistanis and they are immune to the lure. Okay, so they are going to ignore the lure of an alliance with radical Islamic forces. I don't know what's his basis for saying this. However, the period of 1977 to 88, okay, 77 to 88. Remember what was Bollywood doing in this decade? However, the period between 1977 and 88 witnessed the consolidation of the dominance of the armed forces over the state and its role as the protector of of Pakistan's Islamic ideological and geographical frontiers. Even these religiously conservative military officers of the Pakistani ISI played a crucial role in the training of the holy warriors or mujahideen in Afghanistan and Kashmir. The army and Islam became synonymous for the preservation of Pakistani national integrity. With the accession of General Zia to power in 1977, the role of Islamic ideology in politics had reached a critical turning point. The army's role was redefined as the defender of faith. It was Zia's fear of popular forces which induced him to rule on the basis of military terror, basing on Islamic ideology. Zia's regime's education and other policies revived religious symbolism. Religious groups made a. So you see, this is where Pakistan's whatever ascent they had probably could have done, all that ended here. This is where their descent had begun. Zia regime's education and other policies revived religious symbolism. Religious groups made a transition from the periphery, bahar bahar tha, to the mainstream in education and politics. Zia's policies enhanced the role of the state in giving direction to religious discourse in the country. Further, in the context of the Iranian Revolution and Soviet intervention, the West began viewing Islam largely through a security lens. Okay, and now a commie, secular or liberal would probably say that this is what India is also doing. Modi is General Ayub Khan, who has given a gigantic GDP growth rate and a lot of economically nice things we are doing. But now all the Hindu symbolism is entering the education system, etc. Saffronization of education is going on, and therefore we will become Hindu Pakistan very soon. But you see that shows a fundamental misreading of what the fundamentals of Hinduism are. We have to stop mistaking Hinduism for an Abrahamic faith. We have done that. A lot of us have done that for a long time. We have to now admit that that's not the case. The West began. Okay, it was the American policy response to these events which first fostered the perception that Pakistan was a frontline state, and in pursuance of the broad goal that the US evolved a policy of dual containment, containing Iran and the Soviet Union. Okay, so Ankit Shah says that there lots of groups and alliances come and go, but the alliance we were seeing for all these years since independence was basically an alliance not between US government but US deep state, that is their capitalist and CIA class, US deep state, UK government, CCP and Pakistan ISI. This is the only alliance that has gone on strongly for all these years, last 40-50 years. Now he's saying that the new alliance is between Xi Jinping, not Xi Jinping, no, I should not misquote him, I forget. It's now between Indian government, I think China government to a large extent, and US deep state again. But everyone else is kicked out from this alliance now. So dual containment, how to contain Iran and Soviet Union. This followed the collaboration between the US and Pakistan, which was instrumental in forging unity among various Afghan resistance groups and religious groups in Pakistan. Using the metaphor mujahideen to these Afghan fighters gave a boost to the revival of Islamic sentiments among the religious groups in Pakistan. Thus, by the 1980s, once again Pakistan exposed itself to manipulation of Islamic symbols, and the return of Islam to the center stage was now complete. As a powerful political, cultural, and religious force, emphasis on Islam as an element of national polity gave a new strength to the religious parties, groups, and leaders, and it created a nexus between the custodians of Islam and the country's military establishment, civilian bureaucracy, and intelligence apparatus, which saw itself as the guardian of the state. And no wonder it is in this period that Bollywood's love affair with Urdu poetry and things like that begins to the largest extent. Zia's politics of Islamization of Pakistan. Okay, let me check some comments now and have a sip of coffee. ভাই মুজিব অনেকটাই ওরকম পাওয়ারের জন্য সব করেছে yes Mujib was also power hungry. This is what I was thinking about right before starting the live stream, that Bangladesh's main selling point and the unity between Bengalis of West Bengal and at least Kolkata and Bangladesh is on this very basis that Bangladesh fought a war with Pakistan just because of their love for their mother tongue Bengali. Itna pyar hai Bangla ke liye. All that's dead now. First of all, it was not because of the Bengali language. It was because they were Bengalis. Pakistan, as racist people, were hating Bengalis, and they did not give any representation to the people who are actually getting more votes from Bangladesh in the government which was being run from Pakistan. That's why they fought the war. Language had nothing to do with it. It was a racial issue. Secondly, even that language issue has completely gone away now. The Bengali they speak is almost Hindi. Okay, it's 60% Hindi. Their Bengali is absolutely bullshit. It may have happened because of the petrodollar fundings of those eras, but they have not saved Bangla language at all. Rutvik has sent $200. Thank you, Rutvik. Busy with work to write my reading of Ankit. This was one of the major criticisms I had. Liberal Islam is a greater threat. Ataturk, Jinnah, Mujibur, etc. Liberal scripture can counter. Yeah, we have to be on our toes. We can't sit back and relax. Even if everything Ankit Shah says comes true, we can't sit back and relax. We have to be on our toes. We have to be wary, because now we are the generation that has seen things in front of our eyes. Okay, so maybe our next generation or 2 generations later again, they can feel some complacency. We can't feel complacency. We have just found out, read so many things. Things are going on in front of our eyes. We will have to be careful. But I don't think Ankit Shah entirely ignores everything that we are discussing. Okay, today even when he came on Nirajatri's podcast, Nirajatri did push him to a large extent that, but you see, what you are saying does not make sense because these things happened anyway from much earlier as well. So he's saying that he's not ignoring those things. Okay, Ankit Shah is not clueless on the history of these things. Okay, Modi is inviting Harvard, Oxford, etc. nemesis to India. They are the ones spewing casteism venoms on India. Yes, not much longer. Okay, ज़्यादा दिन नहीं चलेगा, according to Ankit Shah's predictions, because these universities probably won't exist, or their monetary power might not exist. Kami will argue that in Rig Ved, first mandal within 10 shuktas, it is written that people there, they have written those who don't respect Indra should leave. Yes, I've read that. Yes, that even Rig Ved teaches sort of kill the disbelievers, etc. Zia's, even if that is the case, so what? Even if that is the case, so what? No, we didn't follow it. No one's following it today. Zia's politics of Islamization. Pakistan was put on the path of Islamization under the watch of General Zia, an ardent Islamist. Using Islam as the basis of ruling ideology, apart from a role in individual and social life, religion could extend its influence in the functioning of the state institutions. Zia's Islamization campaign brought Islamist policies to a high point in Pakistan. Though many believe that he manipulated Islamic ideology to give legitimacy to his rule. Did he manipulate Islamic ideology? During his rule, the people of Pakistan could make the distinction between their own affinity with Islam and an Islamic identity from Zia's cosmetic Islamization. Zia's campaign also revived religious symbolism and lent legitimacy to religious and conservative groups. Under Zia, a close alliance emerged between the military and the orthodox Sunnis. For the military,
These mullahs and their conservative Islam provided an ideological justification for army's dominant role in Pakistani politics. The mullahs and the religious parties were to be an effective counter to secular leftist and socialist politicians. Military dictators have quoted religious parties as a counter to secular opposition groups and political parties. Although Although Pakistan's main Islamist parties have considerable capacity for mobilizing street power, they have never garnered strong electoral support. Historically, when the Islamic parties have participated in elections, they have captured between 5% and 8% of the votes. This is very interesting, guys. Okay? Islamic parties in Pakistan were repeatedly being kicked out of the elections, with the notable exception of 1988 when they reached 12%. Okay? 12% मैक्सिमम वोट मिला इस्लामिक पार्टियों को पाकिस्तान में. Very interesting. And 88 is, I guess, Salman Khan's debut. The most obvious explanation for their lack of success is their unpopularity. The trend only changed during Musharraf's October 2002 provincial and national elections, in which the Muttahida Majlisi Amal MMA, an alliance of 6 Islamist parties, obtained majority in the legislatures of the provinces of Balochistan and the NWFP, although it received only 11.1% of the votes at the national level. Okay, नेशनल में तब भी 11.1% है, मगर मेजोरिटी उस रीजन में थोड़ा मिला. ओके ना, वहाँ पे तो तालिबान वैसे भी हो गए थे. बट ऑल द पेट्रोडॉलर फंडिंग, द रिजल्ट ऑफ दोज थिंग्स, द कल्मिनेशन इज नाउ हैपनिंग इन द लेट 80s. ओके, Musharraf's selective restrictions on political rallies, introduction of a new set of qualification criteria for nomination of the candidates, barring of 2 former prime ministers and their followers from election, and permission to MMA to campaign helped the Islamists achieve this electoral success. Moreover, because the MMA campaigned essentially in madrasas and mosques as a part of religious observances, it was relatively unaffected by the ban on rallies decreed by the military governments. Okay, interesting loophole. But in 2008 elections, the defeat of MMA and the vote for parties like Awami National Party shows the popular yearning to end bloodshed, and it sent out a clear verdict against Musharraf's 8 years of rule and appeared to be a rejection of fundamentalist Islam. The Pakistanis voted for mainstream political parties and that espouse moderate agenda and brought in liberal democratic forces to the helm of affairs. However, much of the Islamization program of Zia remained symbolic in character without making any fundamental change in the character of the national life and basic social system. The main change involved in the process was a major shift in the outlook of the role of Islam in the government. The intolerant and narrow interpretation of Islam by Deobandis during Islamization process has in fact inspired Islamic terrorism. और देवबंद है कहाँ पे? यूपी पे. जगह का नाम क्या है? देवबंद. Okay, Dev. It can be said in retrospect that Zia contributed much to the rise of Islamic fundamentalism, obscurantism and retrogression that is threatening Pakistan today. Oh, it's not only threatening Pakistan, it's threatening India as well. Rig Veda is about fight between tribes on the basis of their beliefs. They later teach a compromise to worship gods of all tribes. Yes, that is Sudasa's main achievement. That is why Vishwamitra was given sort of a platform. He was from the losing faction of the tribe. Rishi Vashisht was mainly Sudasa's guru, sort of, as far as I remember. I might get a few names wrong. For the last 2 centuries, there have been those who have responded to change in the world's balance of power by asserting religious renewal based upon reform and revival as the solution to Muslim decline. Prominent among these groups were the 19th century Wahhabi movement, which originated in Saudi Arabia and spread to most parts of the Muslim world. Wahhabism has also played an important role in spreading Islamic terrorism in Pakistan. Starting in the mid-1970s, the Islamic resurgence was funded by an abundance of money from Saudi Arabian oil exports. The poorly controlled flow of Saudi money outside the kingdom has probably done more to influence Islamic terrorism than has Saudi religious thinking. Saudi petrodollars, in fact, corrupted politically and intellectually an entire generation and produced, in reaction, a cynical, puritanical Islamic generation. Saudi money has therefore reinforced the militant Islamic trend more directly by funding charitable Islamic causes. Saudi Arabia's lavish funding of religious institutions reflected its Wahhabi state ideology. The impact of this expansion, mushrooming of mosques and madrasas across Pakistan and every part of Bengal and India, has been immense, and in the process, Sunni Islam in Pakistan has undergone a seismic shift by becoming increasingly conservative. The madrasas were used as a springboard for Wahhabi Islam as practiced in Saudi Arabia. You see, Ankit Shah is right in this observation here. This checks out. The Sufi and the Barelvi schools, two main Sunni traditions in Pakistan, were on retreat. The Deobandis have largely been funded by Saudi Arabia in an attempt to reshape Sunnism and to preach the ideology of hate. While the Saudi and US money made much of the Afghan resistance possible during the 1980s, the Pakistani ISI controlled the flow of much of this money and helped fund Afghan extremists like Gulbuddin Hekmatyar and his Hizb-e-Islami, and then provided direct support to Taliban cordsmen. There is no secret that jihadi violence emanated from radical and backward-looking strains of Islam, such as Wahhabism and Salafism. Saudi money has funded organizations like Lashkar, whose stated objective is to spread fundamentalist Islam. Islam is interpreted violently and aggressively under Wahhabi influence. Incidentally, even some Bengali Hindus have the surname of Lashkar, which means that their ancestors were probably the hired goons of Muslim kings in Bengal. The Wahhabis have divided the world strictly into believers and non-believers. Arey, shit. Lol. Yeah. Now, here again, a bit of the premise seems flawed based on what we know now. This is in 2010 at least. That the Wahhabis have divided the world strictly into believers and non-believers. Even though we know that that is not the case, that it's actually everyone. Every book in Islam says that the world is divided between believers and non-believers. That is the basis of founding of Pakistan as a country. Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Harb. ये तो वहाबी ने सिर्फ बना दिया, बाकी लोग बिलीव नहीं करते हैं, ऐसा नहीं है. Since Saudi Arabia perceives Pakistan as a key vehicle for frontline support of Islam in South Asia, it will encourage fundamentalist Islam in Pakistan, and therefore the Mumbai underworld, Bollywood underworld, funding of Bollywood movies, Salim Javed, Salman Khan, Shah Rukh Khan, Amir Khan. It will encourage fundamentalist Islam in Pakistan. And then the India-Pakistan friendship tours and ideologies and the different peace talks, okay, that their artists will perform here, etc. Their singers will sing here. All those ideas begin to proliferate in India. The proliferation of madrasas was another important dimension of Islamization process. Zia encouraged various sectarian groups, particularly the Deobandi school, and promoted the proliferation of madrasas to strengthen Sunnism. In Pakistan, Deobandis regard themselves as the main voice of Sunni Islamic orthodoxy and echo many of the puritanical Sunni Wahhabi traditions of Islam. Zia regime's Islamization dramatically altered madrasa education in Pakistan, boosting the influence of the Deobandi madrasas. These madrasas taught a conservative interpretation of Islam with emphasis on jihad and rejection of innovation in Islamic law. In fact, the Deobandis call for a pan-Islamic identity unencumbered by nation or religion. The Deoband influence transcends borders and has the potential to influence Muslims globally. However, Deobandism is by no means confined to South Asia. By encouraging these madrasas, Zia won over the powerful Muslim clergy and strengthened their role as religious teachers and interpreters. The madrasa-based clergy, by its teachings, creates a mindset among some that can easily be preyed upon and used by agents of terror for their own nefarious ends. Mostly the poor Muslims who cannot afford to spend on education, food and shelter attend these madrasas where the basic requirements are provided free, and that funding has come from petrodollar. The heavy networks of madrasas in Pakistan that are often blamed for fueling radical Islam, mainly the spirit of jihad, have enjoyed state patronage. About 20% of madrasas play an incubating role for religious radicalism
by providing fundamentalist teaching from the Deobandi, Wahhabi, and Salafi schools of thought and paramilitary training. In 1947, there were this author probably has not read Ambedkar's book, 1946 book, Pakistan or Partition of India, because he seems to be surprised with these occurrences. He seems to feel like he gives me the vibe that he thinks, oh wow, these things happened. Oh wow, these things are happening for the first time. Oh, aisa bhi hota hai. All that had happened already. That is why Pakistan was created. That is why Jogendranath Mandal had to run back the Dalit Jogendranath Mandal, okay, the first law minister of Pakistan, had to run for his life from Bangladesh and settled in the safe Hindu fascist India. And Ambedkar wrote repeatedly, हिंदुओं का क्या होगा, हिंदुओं का क्या होगा, ये तो उलेमा में बिलीव करेंगे. Okay, if a Muslim country attacks India, who are the Muslims in the Indian army going to fight for? That was Ambedkar's big query. So I don't think this author knows all these things. He's very surprised with these ideas. Okay, about 20% of madrasas play an incubating role. Yeah, ये तो हो गया. Incubation, okay, for religious radicalism by providing fundamentalist teaching from the Deobandi, Wahhabi, and Salafi schools of thought and paramilitary training. In 1947, there were 136 madrasas in Pakistan and 30,000 by 2000, by the year 2000. Okay, this is important. These facts are the reason why I am reading this paper written by a guy who otherwise seems clueless on a lot of things. But you see, these are the facts we need to keep in mind. In 1947, there were only 136 madrasas in Pakistan. By the year 2000, it has reached 30,000 madrasas. Okay, how has that happened? That has happened with petrodollar money. By now, the number could be as high as 45,000. This is being written in the year 2008. Okay. Zia created a chain of madrasas along the Afghan-Pakistan border in order to create a belt of religiously oriented students who would assist the Afghan Mujahideen to evict the Soviets from Afghanistan. These madrasas were also funded by the CIA, and some Muslim countries became political centers of Islamic militancy. During the Afghan-Soviet War, over 3 million Afghans became refugees in Pakistan, mostly in the northwest frontier province. Thousands of young men grew up in these camps, and their families sent their sons to Deobandi madrasas along the border. They were provided free Islamic education, indoctrinating them into a militant version of jihadism. जिहादिज्म नॉन मिलिटेंट नहीं है तो और क्या है, और किस तरह का, ये तो प्रियंका चोपड़ा का डायलॉग है हीरो द लव स्टोरी ऑफ अ स्पाई में, कि जिहाद का मतलब होता है अपने आप के अंदर के शैतान को मारना. That is how this paper is being written, that indoctrinating them into a militant version of jihadism, as if there's some other version of jihadism as well. Ajeeb baat hai. The madrasa system churned out hordes of religious graduates with few skills or training for mainstream profession. Or if that might be the case, if in fact I am wrong here and people who believe in what I'm saying are wrong, then that might be how de-radicalization happens because of de-dollarization and the weakening of the petrodollar as well. That now they don't want to fund these things. Okay, here the government of India is funding them, funding so many Muslims, their education, scholarship, Ladli Behna, etc. That's improving their lives, etc. And upliftment of women will always lead to lower fertility rates. There, Saudi Arabia and UAE are not going to fund radicalism. Therefore, there might be a serious crunch in Islamic radicalism in the future. Therefore, Ankit Shah's predictions might be in fact true. Because if there is in fact a different interpretation for jihadism, which is non-militant, andar ke shaitan ko marna, if that is the case, if a lot of people believe in it, and if believing in the other kind of jihad becomes non-lucrative economically, then yes, then that kind of reform and that kind of belief of the andar ka shaitan might become mainstream again in Muslims. The madrasa system churned out hordes of religious graduates with few skills or training for mainstream profession. This growing army of extremists in Pakistan fought the anti-Soviet Afghan jihad alongside the Arabs and Afghans, and still serves the cause of jihads from India to Russia. After the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan in 1989, instead of slowing down, the rapid spread of jihadi madrasas in Pakistan continued unabated with the help of Saudi petrodollars. For the poor, the madrasa education became very lucrative for its free boarding and food in the absence of government-funded secular schools. Okay, interestingly, we have madrasas in Bengal. They are government-funded, but they are not secular. We have government funded madrasas, for which the budget, according to my math, is 5,166 crores. The successive Pakistani governments also encouraged this to avoid much spending on education. It was General Ayub Khan who could realize that much of the increasing militancy of the mullahs had to do with the madrasas. For the first time, his government sensed the danger posed by the madrasas in promoting Islamic militancy. Now, going back to the fundamentals, let me check some comments before we start this part. This is the basis of that Avtarvad and all devas being ultimately same. Can you briefly give some points of difference between Sanatan Dharma and Vedic Dharma? We can debate on some other time. Okay. Interesting conversation going on. Okay. Charvaka Buddhism, Jainism, non-Vedic but Sanatani. Yes, and Ajivika, whom जिसका genocide अशोक ने कर दिया बुद्धिज्म के non-violence से. Okay, let me just check if any other. Okay. Now, getting back to the paper. Going back to the fundamentals. The politicization of Islam, with all its moral certainties, has produced a fundamentalism that stands in contradiction to the religious liberties and political freedoms of the rest of the world. As we know, Islamic fundamentalism, its Islamic fundamentalist ideals predate the creation of Pakistan to the 18th century, when Indian Muslims were concerned over the decline of Islam in the subcontinent. There was decline of Islam in the Indian subcontinent, and there's a lot of debate about the Muslim participation in 1857. And I've heard a lot of people say that no, that was just their call for jihad and it was not sort of a Hindu-Muslim unity. But in fact, it was not. Okay, some Muslims in the revolt of 1857 may have had personal Islamic nation visions, because after all they did approach Bahadur Shah Zafar to run the country after they kick out the British. But you see, if it was completely Islamic in nature, then Sir Syed Ahmed Khan would not have criticized the Muslims who participated in the revolt of 1857 so harshly. Okay, that is one of the findings of J. Sai Deepak's research in India, Bharat, Pakistan, that Sir Syed Ahmed Khan was viciously critical of all the Muslims who participated in revolt of 1857. He writes to the British that saying that these were some fucking dumbasses. They thought that they are going to free the country. It was very misplaced. It was very misconceived. They were absolutely wrong to do it. Okay. He was with the British all the time, and he said that Muslims should not ask for an independence where Hindus are a majority. Even if it's a Muslim running the country, that should not happen at the moment. So this is that part, the decline of Islam in the Indian subcontinent. The arrival of British power in India proved traumatic for Muslims because they had ruled in the subcontinent for many centuries. And yes, and that is why Mir Jafar, whom especially in Bengal we know as the great betrayer, is in fact a hero for Hindus in many ways, because he was able to end the brutal dictatorial reign of Siraj-ud-Dowla, who was an absolute nightmare for Hindus of West Bengal. Muslims had ruled most part of the north, and you see, Mir Jafar kind of broke the ulema idea. He sided with Jagat Seth and other and British and Hindu businessmen of Murshidabad to end the rule of Siraj-ud-Dowla. He did not stand up for his Muslim brother. And that's why he is called a traitor to such an extent by our academic mainstream, because they are kind of being funded or being convinced by their Muslim counterparts, no, that this guy is such a big betrayer because he betrayed his Muslim brother. Okay, but the point is that yes, he sided with British and Hindu businessmen to betray his Muslim brother. That's a very significant thing. That's not to be looked down upon. But they are extra pissed off with Mir Jafar because he betrayed his Muslim brothers. Muslims had ruled most part of the northern India from the 12th century on, much of the south since the 15th century, and nearly all of India was consolidated under the Mughal Empire in 1526. As the British power consolidated itself at the expense of Muslim dynasties and states, Indian Muslims grew increasingly traumatized and determined to reinvigorate their society. And mysteriously, they did not mention the Maratha Empire. Finding the reasons for the decline of Muslim power, in the ideological laxity and ossification of traditional practices. Yes, this was their idea, that since we are not following Islam to its fundamentals, therefore the decline of Islamic power has occurred in this Indian subcontinent. We should go back to the fundamentals, and only then Islam will reach its past glory once again in India. Because a lot of Muslim kings were engaging in so much debauchery, they were not leading the pious life recommended in Islam, and that pissed off a lot of Islamic reformers. Many fundamentalist reformist movements like Farasidi movement in Bengal sprang up, aiming at purifying, performing, and deepening Islam's role in society and strengthening the position of Indian Muslims under the British rule. The hurtful remarks of the reformist movements were even directed against the religious scholars or ulema, whose attitude towards non-Muslim authority was perceived to be weak and acquiescent. And that is when Mir Jafar comes and destroys Sirajuddaulah. This made many of the religious scholars to develop an extensive body of theory and practice in proclaiming jihad and fighting to expel the infidel British rulers from India. Ideas stressing a return to the basic principles of Islam were carried on in the traditions and teachings of the great Indian theological school at Deoband and the Barelvi schools. Contemporary fundamentalists, better described by the term Islamists, drawing on the reform roots of the past, seek to establish the just Islamic society under the application of Islamic law as a fulfillment of God's design. These ideas find full resonance in modern Pakistani Islamic thinking today. Pakistani Islamic thinking shares the contemporary view of the Islamists in the Muslim world, who look to the roots of Islam to provide guidelines for the moral issues of contemporary society, and view that it is obligatory on the part of the state to apply Islamic principles to modern society to attain the just society, because they believe in complete equality. And that is why communists are always such great friends with Muslims. Islamist politicians urge the implementation of the sacred law, Sharia, for its own sake, and in the pious expectation that such implementation will either be an efficient solution or bring some divine favor. Ashirwad milega. In brief, the Islamists do not have a clear political agenda, or they are unable to spell out their political, economical, and social policies. The only discernible character of Islamists is their conservative social instincts, favoring the social order of the status quo. The focus of the Islamists has been Islamization of the state rather than reform of the individuals. This has generated conflict, as the Islamic fundamentalists seek to impose their will through coercion, violence, and terror. And you see, this is why them being a minority does not matter, because they are clear that they have to take over state power. State power is the main point. Numbers are not even the main point. When numbers happen, that's also an icing on the cake. But the main point is state power. Their intention is to enforce fear-based obedience to Islamic doctrines. This implies their doctrinal obsession, leading to fanaticism and extremism. Confusion is created intentionally in the minds of the people to enforce obedience to religion. These fundamentalists do not know the fundamentals of Islam. Okay, and this guy who is writing the paper apparently knows the fundamentals of Islam. What a random claim to make out of the blue. These fundamentalists do not know the fundamentals of Islam. Ajeeb aadmi hai. They have little understanding of the society and its complexities. Oh, acha. They are extremists associated with the extreme streak of Islam, known as militant Islam. Kahan se milta hai isko ye sab? The terror that is inflicted on the innocents by these extremists is Wahhabi terror. In the context of the extremism, there are two types of madrasas, the Deobandi school and the Ahle Hadith school, both emphasizing on purifying Islam of its un-Islamic accretions. Quote, the largest Islamic sects with the greatest control over religious schools in Pakistan are the Deobandis, who control an estimated 65% of Pakistan's madrasas and are among the most militant in their demands for the Pakistani state to become truly Islamic. Okay, see, everything is being written academically like a paper. All of a sudden, in between, he gave two random claims without any citations, without any claims, or without any anyone agreeing with it, any other scholar. He did not quote anyone. Randomly, he made two claims and moved on. This is so polemical. Okay, he's saying this sentence is so hilarious. The fundamentalists have little understanding of its fundamentals. Okay, the fundamentalists do not know the fundamentals of Islam. Ye claim kaise kar diya without any citation? What the fuck? The Deobandis see themselves as belonging to a more orthodox form of Islam. Deobandism is at heart separatist and divisive in splitting the Muslim community and driving a wedge between Muslims and non-Muslims. Yes, उसके पहले कभी नहीं हुआ था. It has been found attractive by the alienated younger generation due to its clear-cut certainties of what is godly and what is sinful. The hardliners, by preaching Puritan Islam, run the risk of pushing the Muslim youths to the thin line that divides fundamentalism and terrorism. This fundamentalist thrust is being given to Islam to bring the religion back to the public as well as private sphere. तू है पर तुझे पता नहीं है वाला लॉजिक. Yes, and this guy's surname is Mohanty. He knows more than the Islamic fundamentalists, man. In the post 9/11 period, the world has witnessed the continuation of subversive Islamic activities with varying degrees of extremism in different countries of South Asian region, particularly in Pakistan. The blowback from the continuing political conflict in Afghanistan and opposition to the global war on terrorism have served to catalyze anti-Americanism and armed Islamist activism in Pakistan. After joining the US-led war on terror, the Pakistani state turned against the same extremists whom it trained and used earlier to attain its foreign policy objectives, consequently inviting their wrath. In Pakistan, crackdowns on the jihadi outfits have backfired, triggering large-scale militant collaborations and subsequent retaliation. Just before the July 2007 Lal Masjid crackdown, thousands of militants affiliated with Sunni groups such as the Lashkar-e-Jhangvi, Jaish-e-Mohammed, and Huji had recognized themselves against government forces. The fall of the Lal Masjid was perhaps the beginning of radical Islamic resurgence in Pakistan in recent times. The military action against the madrasas during Musharraf period provided justification for escalating militancy and religious fundamentalism. More importantly, the US-led war in Pakistan's neighborhood has aggravated the situation and impelled the terrorists to consolidate and form umbrella groups to fight back. The continuing US presence in Afghanistan and the Pakistani government's support to Washington, without any tangible positive results for the Afghans, has further intensified the grievances of the fundamentalist groups. Muslims see this war on terrorism as a war on Islam. Islamists feel that the war is a kind of civilizational war, at its core, a war with Islam. With the emergence of the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan in South Waziristan and throughout the lawless FATA, throughout the lawless FATA, and with leaders like Masood and Maulana Hafiz Gul having direct operational ties with the Afghan Taliban, the region has witnessed a resurgence and consolidation of Islamic forces irrespective of ideological goals and areas of operation. Under the leadership of Masood, who nurtured the idea that only jihad can bring peace to this world, youths indoctrinated in various terrorist camps now fight to cleanse Pakistani society of moderate or liberal forces, directing their holy war against the Pakistani government, its pro-US policies, and any effort to install a democratic structure. The rise of extremism also signifies the growing Talibanization of Pakistani society. Today, Talibanization is a pressing problem in Pakistan. The Taliban creed is a cancerous product of Pakistani madrasa incubation. Pakistan is experiencing an alarming increase in the incidence of violence from Taliban extremists seeking to impose Islamic law by force. Taliban's anomalous interpretation of Islam emerged from an extreme and perverse interpretation of Deobandism preached by Pakistani mullahs in Afghan refugee camps. Okay. Yeah. Again, bullshit claims, not without any citations, okay? Randomly, he decides that it's a perverse interpretation of Deobandism. Taliban believes that by returning to the fundamentals of Islam, they will be able to purge the society of all Western, alien, or non-Islamic influences that have corrupted the Islamic culture. Inside Pakistan, this jihadi ideology of Taliban holds the key to the rise of religious fundamentalism. With a new generation of terrorist leaders taking the reins of jihad, and terrorist groups preferring to work collectively in spite of their ideological differences, the situation has further deteriorated. Further, the appeasement policy of the Pakistani government towards radical Islamic groups has strengthened their morale. The grip of Al-Qaeda and pro-Taliban fundamentalists over the region has been strengthened by the so-called government militant peace initiatives. This is written in 2010, okay? Islamic fundamentalism in recent times has been on the rise due to the
perceived sense of economic and cultural alienation of the Muslims. ये economic alienation का argument और excuse खत्म नहीं होगा कभी. Millions of Muslims feel that they are unequal participants in a world order that maintains the hegemony of Eurocentric culture in which economic, social, political, and ideological inequalities are not addressed, but Hindus magically overcome this problem and succeed and don't do terrorism. This strikes a chord with millions of Muslims who feel disaffected and alienated by social injustice and poverty. See, the problem is that the premises, okay, these are the premises that social injustice हो रहा है, poverty हो रहा है काहे, कोई poor नहीं रहेगा. This idea of complete equality, these premises are the problem, which have caused eugenics, which have caused transgenderism, which have caused communism, socialism, which have caused Islamic terrorism here, which is causing people to think that lower population is great. All that is associated with these bullshit premises. तो प्रेमिसेस दिया है, अब लेंस दिया है सोचने का, तो उनको लगेगा कि हम तो भाई पुअर है, इक्वालिटी का है नहीं आया, सोशल इनजस्टिस हुआ है, तो चलो अब मार देते हैं किसको. उसको बोलने किसको बोला था कि अरे ये प्रेमिस है, ये पढ़ो, ये प्रेमिस ही गलत है. Or who are on the receiving end of politics of harsh and corrupt regimes seem to be supported by Western powers. Both the Western liberal democracy and the devout Muslims believe in social justice and the advancement of conditions of the poor. But the market economy model of the West has failed to deliver the social justice across the globe. The desire for fair treatment from the hands of the powerful Western countries has inspired many to struggle for such justice through radical religious solutions or violence. And this is why Indian communists have so much love for Islamic terrorism. This is why, you see, their war is against American imperialism, and therefore they think we are allies in this war against American imperialism. The voices of militant Islam are as much a radical cry against perceived political and social injustices as they are religious movements. Islamic fundamentalists have been fighting to transform their societies through implementation of Sharia. See, this is why we need to read papers written by even people whom we disagree with. We can see that some things we are learning when he's saying facts, when he's making bullshit claims without any citations, we know where to disagree, and overall we are learning of how certain academics think. The problem with our college university students are that they just read a paper and they think that's Ved Vakya immediately. Okay, लिख दिया है तो मानना है immediately. Islamic fundamentalists have been fighting to transform their societies through implementation of Sharia. These new generations of Islamists do not want to share the secular worldview of the powerful due to its inherent absolutism. In Pakistan, the poor economic performances of the authoritarian regimes, social and sectarian divisions, and negligence of the social sector have generated resentment, frustrations, and grievances among the masses, explaining the growth of fundamentalist Islam. No, it does not explain the growth of fundamentalist Islam, because when General Ayub Khan did 10.5% GDP growth rate in Pakistan, they got pissed off with General Ayub Khan for not having the word Islamic Republic in their constitution. Okay, so you see, this is an honest academic you can disagree with. He's not omitting facts. He's presenting facts which we can use later to debunk his own claims. His claims are bullshit. His facts are not bullshit. Militant Islam as a strategic option. Pakistan's foreign policy is a reflection of the ideological churning with the country since its creation. Both the military and civil regimes have defined, protected, and executed identity of state through a combination of religious and militarist nationalism. For more than 3 decades, Pakistan has looked upon militant Islam as a strategic option. The nexus between the Pakistani military and the fundamentalists was established during the East Pakistan crisis of 71. The Al-Badr and Al-Shams terrorist groups organized by Jamaat-e-Islami, the most influential fundamentalist party of Pakistan, could not save the bifurcation of Pakistan, leading to the creation of Bangladesh. But since then, the Islamists have remained the most dependable allies of the state, particularly in resisting Indian influence in South Asia. Even during the phase of anti-Soviet resistance in Afghanistan, this psychology was at work. The Pakistan army has nurtured and sometimes deployed armed religious fighters in Afghanistan with US support at first, Kashmir and other hotspots of the subcontinent, who have resorted to violence against non-believers or engaged in violence due to their violent interpretation of jihad, as if there is some other interpretation of jihad. The Islamic parties in Pakistan have provided an Islamic rationale for fighting the Soviets in Afghanistan and Indian controlled Muslim majority parts of Kashmir. It was Pakistan's okay. Now okay. It might be a politically correct thing to say, but there is no such thing as Indian controlled Muslim majority parts of Kashmir. There's just Kashmir, or there might be Muslim majority parts of Kashmir, but there's no such thing as Indian controlled Kashmir. All Kashmir belongs to India. It was Pakistan's fundamentalist parties that exported fundamentalist ideology to Kashmir and Afghanistan. हाँ उससे पहले तो नहीं था. ऐसे ही राजा वो कौन सा राजा था लास्ट राजा ऑफ कश्मीर उसके उसके खुद के आर्मी के मुस्लिम सोल्जर्स ने अपने हिंदू गुरखा कंपेट्रियट्स का गला काट दिया रात को गला काट के ठंडे नदी में फेंक दिया किसी को बस्ते में डाल के हाथ पैर बांध के फेंक दिया नदी में. ये सब लिखा है संजय दीक्षित के बुक में. All historically factual. The Islamic parties in Pakistan have provided an Islamic rationale for fighting the Soviets in Afghanistan and Indian-controlled Muslim majority parts of Kashmir. It was Pakistan's fundamentalist parties that exported fundamentalist ideologies to Kashmir and Afghanistan. Not true, it was there from before. Both of which were earlier free from such ideological fervors. 100% horseshit. Whatever the nuisance capabilities of the jihadi groups, they were a creation of the Pakistani army and Rimam by Rimam. What's the word? Rimam. I've never heard this word. By and large under its and remain, I guess. Okay, yeah. So and remain by and large under its control. These groups were first ordered a role in the management of the country's foreign policy, particularly in Afghanistan during Zia's period. But their role in Kashmir and elsewhere was perpetuated by Zia's successors as suited the needs of the military establishment. Following Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan, some other factors had its impact on Pakistan's strategy and response towards Islamic militants. First, having discovered the strength of Islamists, Zia, whose original stated goal was to reduce the threat of Soviet expansionism, started advancing a more ambitious agenda. He nurtured them as an integral part of the state apparatus, the fundamentalists. Second, he felt that victory by resistance would produce, for the first time, a genuinely friendly and supportive regime in Afghanistan, which in turn would help Pakistan to gain strategic depth against India. This has been a long cherished goal of Islamic planners in Pakistan. Pakistan was founded in the first place because of this idea. Third, Pakistan, after installing Taliban in Afghanistan, intended to install Taliban prototypes in the Central Asian republics and thereby reaching out to radical Islamic forces globally. और सब मिलके बाद में इंडिया को मारेंगे ऐसा इनका सपना था. The success of the jihadist experiment against the Soviets, with no apparent costs to itself, encouraged Pakistan's strategic planners to extend the jihad even into unstable post-Soviet Central Asia through Taliban. Pakistan's intention behind installing Taliban prototypes in the 5 Central Asian republics had 2 objectives. First, the desire to emerge as the center of global Islamic resurgence, enhancing its prestige and position within the Islamic world, and second, to extend its influence and play a major role in the geopolitics of the clergy-rich Central Asia. Pakistan tried to use Taliban to strengthen radicals in these republics, hoping to establish Taliban-type regimes there. कितना सपना था पाकिस्तान का भाई, और आज क्या है? Since Afghanistan represents one of the links to Central Asia for Pakistan, Islamists in Islamabad would strongly support Afghan Islamists to help them gain greater influence in Kabul or even to gain power. ये सब क्या करिए, सब भूल जाए. अभी तो 2010 का पेपर है, ऐसा नहीं है कि ये 50 साल का पहले का बात है. Pakistan hoped to leverage these radical groups to its advantage in the politics of Islamic world. In Afghanistan, Pakistan tried to play both the Pashtun and Islamic cards. Pakistan even expected that Islamist groups would be able to transcend ethnic divisions and denounce the traditional Afghan claim on Pashtunistan. हाँ, आप लोग भूल जाइए, Pashtunistan पे आपका हक है. The Taliban in Afghanistan failed to fulfill these twin interests of Pakistan. ये है plot twist. Taliban backfires, okay? They say नहीं भोसड़ी के Pashtunistan तो हमारा ही रहेगा. It was Zia-ul Haq who made full use of the religious extremists to whip up the jihadi possessions and anti-India sentiments. Later, Musharraf too emulated Zia in supping with the Islamic elements, Taliban and Al-Qaeda, encouraging the ISI to foment terrorism in India using the jihadi policy. One of the important aspects of Musharraf's strategy of his survival was to create mutually beneficial relations with Islamists. Like Zia,
Musharraf used religious parties to neutralize mainstream political forces that challenged the political legitimacy of his regime, such as the PPP and the Pakistan Muslim League of Nawaz Sharif. Musharraf, however, did not alienate the mullahs, who were the traditional supporters of the military, in the face of his growing unpopularity after his joining the US-led war on terror. By forging alliances of convenience with the mullahs and religious organizations, he opted to counter secular political adversaries. Musharraf, in fact, supported a dual policy of controlling the jihadis at home while letting them operate outside the country. कितना कितना अच्छा सपना है. His priority has never been to eradicating Islamist extremism, but rather the legitimization of his dictatorial rule, for which he was dependent on the clergy. He was strict on domestic terrorist groups responsible for sectarian killings, but remained constantly ambivalent toward the militants operating in Kashmir. His making a distinction between the terrorists and the freedom fighters always left the possibilities open for supporting the latter. Okay, good terrorists, bad terrorists. Of course, he did take some steps to put a stop to terrorism in Kashmir in order to push forward the Indo-Pak peace process during the tenure of Vajpayee. He announced a ban on several militant groups in November 2003, including two most powerful in Kashmir, like the Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Toiba. Though Musharraf advocated moderation and promised to recast his country as a progressive model for the Muslim world, failed to deliver because he just would not completely abandon the religious extremists. No doubt it is the military that has created and nurtured the forces of jihad and helped the Islamist parties to gain political space at the expense of mainstream political parties. The support the jihadis have received from Pakistani officialdom, and such a link does not exist in any other Muslim country except Iran, which backs the Hezbollah in Lebanon. The politicization and militarization of Islam since the 1970s has given certain terror gangs the advantage of religious conviction to motivate their members to fight jihad in a violent form, quite different from the prescriptive laws of Islam. Oh my God. जब भी कोई घटिया कोई क्लेम बनाना पड़ता है, तब भी ये स्कॉलर कोई साइटेशन बिना साइटेशन दिए जस्ट मूव ऑन कर लेता है क्लेम बना के. देखो क्या एक सेंटेंस बोल दिया विदाउट एनी साइटेशन. ओके, व्हाट अ सेंटेंस. Fight jihad in a violent form, which is different from the prescriptive laws of Islam. He knows the prescriptive laws of Islam. What a sentence. This is absolutely crazy. Let me have a sip of coffee now. Abhay Agarwal is debating in Bengali. Nice. Yes, Rudra and Shiva used to be different. The word Shiva was an adjective. Pure. In the early Rigvedic shlokas or mantras, kya bolte hai, forgot. Let's see. Experimenting pan-Islamic jihad in Kashmir. Pakistan felt that it had gained strategic depth as a consequence of events in Afghanistan and the new link up with Iran. After the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan, with growing experience in training, organizing, and running the Afghan Mujahideen, Pakistan began expanding its operation to sponsor and promote separatism and terrorism in Indian administered portions of Jammu and Kashmir as a long term strategic program. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan provided an opportunity for Pakistan to wage a more offensive policy by playing the Islamic card in the region. Playing this Islamic card allowed Pakistan to enlist US support against its neighbors like India and Iran. During the early 1990s, with the success of Taliban in Afghanistan, the Pakistani ISI could also spread its influence there, in the northwestern part. This was a strategic victory for Pakistani military. Pakistan now felt that it would be strategically in a better position as opposed to India by implementing a strategy of forward depth in Afghanistan and Kashmir to extend its influence to Central Asia and weaken India's hold on the disputed province. Another factor which motivated Pakistan to experiment pan-Islamic jihad in Kashmir was the Iranian backing of the anti-Soviet Mujahideen. Iran and Pakistan maintained relatively close position on Afghan policy. Since Iran needed Pakistan's support during the Gulf War, this is how Pakistan felt psychologically prepared to experiment its jihadi policy against India. Didn't Here to learn is asking, didn't Marathas and Mughals join forces in 1857? Not sure. There weren't any Mughals to fight basically. Bahadur Shah Zafar was in captivity almost. But I'm not sure if exactly Mughals and exactly Marathas joined. I mean, almost the entirety of the country joined hands, but it wouldn't be surprising. This is how Pakistan felt. Okay, although Pakistan did not begin the 1989 uprising in Kashmir, the temptation to fan the flames there was too great for Islamabad to resist. Using guerrilla warfare expertise gained during the Afghan war, Pakistan's ISI is widely believed to have provided active backing for the local Muslim militants over the past decades in the name of proxy war against India. Pakistan's support, both material and moral, is provided in the name of pan-Islamic jihad. No doubt, from the beginning of the 1990s, the struggle in Kashmir has been given a distinctly Islamic flavor by Pakistan, as religious war and jihad with volunteers and assistance coming from the Islamic militant diaspora in aid of their co-religionists in Kashmir. Internally, the Kashmir insurgency that flared up in 1990 entered a new phase by 1995 when the character of militancy underwent significant change. From 1989, indigenous Kashmiri militant outfits like the Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front and pro-Pakistan Hizbul Mujahideen were used. Foreign mercenaries from other countries were used by Pakistan when it felt disappointed with the performance of indigenous Kashmiri militant outfits and took direct control of the insurgency, since the local militancy was on the wane, was almost going away by 1995. Thus, Kashmir's indigenous struggle for self-determination became linked with global jihad of the Islamists. In the name of jihad, Pakistan's main objective was to divert the popular alienation into a sort of liberation movement, and it was supported by all Qawmi academics. Further, it was felt by Pakistani rulers that a division of Jammu and Kashmir on communal lines by tearing apart the socio-cultural fabric of Hindu-Muslim unity will strengthen the sentiments of Muslim solidarity, which can be used to undermine Kashmiriyat and thus shorten the ideological and emotional distance between the Kashmiri Muslims and Pakistan. Weakening the Kashmiriyat was to see that the notion of Islamic Brotherhood or Ummah defeats the prevailing centuries-old Sufi saint thesis of brotherhood of man. The issue of Islamic Brotherhood fetched increased international support, particularly from Islamic countries. As a consequence, the Pakistani military sought to use Wahhabi-oriented radical Islamic groups indoctrinated in madrasas to wage low-intensity conflict to bleed India in Jammu and Kashmir. Bleed India with 1,000 cuts. Pakistan, in fact, tried to indoctrinate the masses in Kashmir with selected discourses on radical Islam as opposed to the tolerant facets of Sufi Islam. The radical Islamists from Pakistan overturned everything that liberal Islam stood for. No citations, okay? Oh, citations apparently from a guy called Kazanchi. I wonder who that is. Their message was love your neighbor more than your brother, which was followed in letter and spirit during the insurgency phase. Was it for a neighbor who is not a believer? Neighbor to ho gaya. Moreover, systematic attempts were made by Pakistan to introduce the ideology of Islamic fundamentalism from outside, an ideology quite alien to the culture of the Muslim saints. There was, of course, a strong pro-Pakistan Islam current in the militant movement in Kashmir. In fact, Pakistan's planners have shown a greater sensitivity to the contradictions between the Kashmiri Sufi Islam and their own Sunni Islam. Therefore, Pakistan's long-term strategy during the first half of the 1990s was to eliminate this contradiction by absorbing Kashmir's special brand of Islam into the larger pan-Islamic Sunni tradition. Pakistan shattered the Kashmiriyat and Rishi culture in Kashmir in a desperate bid to impose Islamic fundamentalism there. अच्छा, Rishi culture था कश्मीर में, और हमने तो सुना है जीव के सोशियोलॉजी प्रोफेसर से कि Kashmir has never been an integral part of India and that is a historical fact. Historical fact है तो Rishi culture कहाँ से आया कश्मीर में? We in India have seen the ugly face of Islamic fundamentalism in Kashmir, where a violent secessionist movement has been engineered by some Muslim radicals supported by Pakistan. This is the biggest legacy of Ziaul Haq to Pakistan, who wanted to make it the global center of Islamic resurgence and brought the Islamic parties onto the center stage, offering them a major say in the state policy making. However, Islamic parties and groups and their existence is not a new phenomenon in Pakistan. They have been existing and playing a role in social and political life since inception. The presence of Islamic parties is a useful foil to reinforce the military regime's legitimacy abroad and to pressure secular parties domestically. Rise of Islamists. The Islamists have benefited from absence of democracy in Pakistan. The silent majority in Pakistan seeks democracy and civilian governance without military's interference or dominance. इसको कैसे पता है भाई silent majority क्या बोल रहा है पाकिस्तान में? This is what I don't understand. Randomly he keeps making claims from every now and then which are absolutely baseless. Maybe he is basing it on the fact that they did not win, Islamic parties in Pakistan did not win any elections ever. At least up until the 80s. उसके बाद तो properly election हुआ ही नहीं है. तो इसको कैसे पता हो रहा है? There was no special Islam in Kashmir, whatever all. Yeah, that is true. Meanwhile, Moinuddin Chishti inviting invaders. Yes. Okay. Only 5 pages left. Then we will end this paper. And now this is getting annoying. These random claims in between good scholarship and research. But their voice is repeatedly lost against the power of the military, the Islamists and terrorists, okay? The mysterious silent majority of Pakistan. The story of Pakistan continues to be one of despotic regimes using religious extremists and external support to keep the secular democratic forces at bay. Yet, despite the failure of the political elite and erosion of institutions of civil society, the people of Pakistan have demonstrated a culture of resistance and remarkable spirit of political consciousness by demanding restoration of democracy, जो कि मेल में खत लिख के सिर्फ इस स्कॉलर को भेजा था और किसी को नहीं पता है. Of course, civilian dispensations have been allowed by the military as a tactical move whenever it could not fulfill the economic, social and political expectations of society, or when international pressures were too mounting. Military rule has created a pressure cooker society congenial for the growth of politics of extremism. हाँ, उससे पहले तो नहीं था extremism. Strengthening civil society and secular political parties as a countervailing force in Pakistan can contain the demands for Islamization made by religious parties and radical Islamist groups. Army rule has been a major factor that has inhibited the emergence of democratic forces. The intimate links between the Taliban and the Pakistani military and its intelligence services is yet another argument in favor of bolstering the democratic institutions to which the military is constitutionally accountable. But many doubt the wisdom of promoting democracy since it is alien to large parts of the Muslim world and there is an existential problem of authoritarianism in governing structures of Muslim countries. Islamists, okay, this is the first original thing here, correct thing he has said with his own citations apparently. Oh, Mahapatra, not Mohanty. Okay, so this is someone else. Islamists who have been victims of oppressive and authoritarian military regimes have turned to extremism and terrorism with a dislike for the US backing to such regimes. But the US feels comfortable with the limited democracy in Pakistan and is reconciled to the army handling the nuclear weaponry and fighting the jihadis. A safety valve is needed for the Pakistani society in the form of demilitarization, which is obviously a part of democratization. By demilitarization, it does not mean the elimination of the army. Rather, it suggests the end of the army's quasi-monopoly on every lever power of Pakistan, whether it exercises these levers directly or indirectly. There is a need to devitalize this prime power center in Pakistan. Both militarism and preservation of class privilege have... Marxist hai, acha. Both militarism and preservation of class privilege have concurred in keeping the Pakistani masses in a semi-literacy state, making them prone to adopt a religiously based culture of resentment while depriving them of the theoretical and practical mechanism that would allow them to challenge the existing social order. Denial of democracy only fuels the fire of extremism. अच्छा. तो रिजेंटमेंट रिलीजियस नहीं होना चाहिए, रिजेंटमेंट सेक्युलर होना चाहिए, तब ठीक है. मगर एंड रिजल्ट एक ही है. रिजेंटमेंट करोगे, ये घटिया प्रेमिसेस से जिंदगी चलाओगे तो अल्टीमेटली एक्सट्रीमिज्म ही होगा, जेनोसाइड ही होगा, बार बार होगा. कम्युनिज्म से भी होगा, इस्लामिक रेडिकलिज्म से भी होगा. दिस इज व्हाट दिस स्कॉलर डज नॉट अंडरस्टैंड ऑब्वियसली. Motivational deficiencies on the part of the army have contributed to the growth of Islamic extremism in the recent years. Musharraf adopted a selective strategy, differentiating between the groups engaged in jihadi violence within Pakistan and terrorists operating against India. Good terrorist, bad terrorist. To put it differently, the military spared those jihadis who were useful for its perception of national interest, supporting the external ambitious vis-a-vis India and Afghanistan. Keeping in tune with this perception, The military deliberately spared the senior leadership of Taliban and was reluctant to intensify operations against the tribal militias during its anti-terrorism campaign in the aftermath of 9/11 incident. Musharraf focused only on Islamist extremists engaged in violence within Pakistan. Towards Taliban, Pakistan has shown leniency. There is little evidence that the military has cut its umbilical ties with Taliban, its own creation in the 1990s. Many in the Pakistani army wish to retain the Taliban as quasi-allies. ये तो अब नहीं होगा. When the Americans leave Afghanistan in future, will provide the strategic depth to Pakistan, which it needs against India. ये सपना तो गया है गड्ढे में. और ये हुड बॉय का quote है, okay? The hood boy, I guess, who is friends with Avijit Mitra, who keeps saying all sorts of hot shit about Hindu fundamentalism in India. Thus, to the utter disappointment of the Afghan president Hamid Karzai, Quetta remains the hub of Taliban opposition to his regime. In fact, the Pax Pakistana policy in Afghanistan, adopted by the US during the 1980s and early 1990s, has strengthened the hands of the military in grooming these Islamic fighters. ये तो नहीं होगा भाई, अब इसका तो एटलीस्ट गारंटी है. एक मिनट रुको. The operational challenges in the federally administered tribal areas, FATA, also reflect the ineffectiveness of the Pakistani military in combating the menace of Islamic militants. Here, the Taliban and Al-Qaeda extremists have taken full advantage of the vast stateless region where law enforcement is very poor. These groups seem to enjoy considerable flexibility of movement inside Pakistan. The local population is violently pro-Taliban and no local support is available for the Pakistani army. The geographical difficulties, intelligence failure and sympathetic attitude of army and intelligence officials towards the radical Islamist elements in FATA also add to the failure of counter-terrorism campaign launched by Musharraf. The radicalized Muslim leaders or Maulvis view the protection of Taliban and Al-Qaeda cadres as a politico-religious obligation. Even these Maulvis are not supportive of the counter-terrorism operations by the military. Their perception is anti-US. They disapprove Pakistan's illegitimate support for the US involved in a global anti-Muslim crusade. However, the recent success in Swat, where Chanakya used to hang out, in Swat and the ongoing operation in Waziristan indicate that previously the Pakistani army did not have a strong desire to eliminate these extremists. Obviously, only after facing the heat from the Washington and to avoid the embarrassment of a unilateral US military action on Pakistani soil against these extremist elements, the Pakistani military took up the challenge in Swat. This paper is written in 2010 and in 2011, Saddam Laden dies in Pakistan. This time, the military could segregate the militants from the public in the sense that the militants did not enjoy public support. SWAT operation was seen by the local population as Pakistan's own offensive. Local population did not support the extremists since it was fed up with Taliban excesses. In the post 9/11 period, the imperial arrogance, unilateralism and military might of the US have forced the Islamists into a world of delusion, reinforcing their conviction that they are in defense of a victimized culture. Abhay is saying, I am pretty sure that he will conclude that India must not become Hindu Pakistan. US have forced the Islamists into a world of delusion. हाँ, तो हम victimized culture है. This is again very annoying because before US did anything, what victimized culture was leading them to do the things that they did. Fundamentally, the Islamists express their grievance against the West. वो तो अभी का excuse है. Particularly the US, by linking the post 9/11 US war efforts with cultural values, its invocation of just war precepts in defense of war on terror, war on terrorism as morally necessary and just, and its espousal of moral universalism. They have developed a feeling that the West has empowered them militarily and its intention is to make them culturally important by imposing its lifestyle, its philosophies, its ideals and values. ये सब excuse है अभी के लिए. For the Muslim world, the West is perceived culturally arrogant. In spite of the richness of its 800 years old civilization, the Muslim world is struggling to resist the onslaught of Western civilization, which has proved socially, morally and politically corrosive and eroding the identity of Muslim societies. The emotionally provocative American assault on Iraq and Afghanistan has led to perceptions of injustice in the Islamic world and made it easy for Islamists to rally fresh recruits to the cause of global jihad. The prevailing notion among the Muslims is that they have been victims of Western aggressions on their culture and territorial sovereignty, and the aggressors pay little attention to their dignity as a civilization. Dignity. The present mood within the Muslim world is a sort of resistance to the imperial designs and the innate sense of superiority of the Western powers. This has led to the emergence of Islamic extremists in Pakistan adopting violence through terror, propagating narrow doctrines of hatred, and believing in a monolithic Islamic civilization. Religious parties, with their anti-American rhetoric, have raised pressure on the government not to support the US and make it harder to crack down on Islamic militant groups. Concluding observations, thankfully. Pakistan's rhetorical emphasis on Islamic principles as a means of strengthening the country's distinctive identity and the ambition to be a global center of political Islam gradually evolved into a long-term strategic commitment to exporting jihadist ideology beyond its national borders. Military-Madrasa-Mullah complex has deliberately encouraged jihadism and manipulated it for expanding regional influence by preferring a tactical deployment of jihadi groups in pursuit of foreign policy goals in Afghanistan and Kashmir. But the way Pakistan got involved in Kashmir and Afghanistan has subsumed its national identity in pan-Islamic dynamic. The US-sponsored anti-Soviet jihad in Afghanistan and the subsequent acceleration of transnational Islamic religious networks has enabled such a transnational vision of Pakistan to flourish. Pakistan therefore has compromised with these jihadis whose creed is pan-Islamic. Therefore, there is the possibility of conflict between the pan-Islamic aspirations of jihadis and the demands of nation building in Pakistan. शायद ऐसा ही हो रहा है आज. The movement for the creation of Pakistan was not based on religious extremism or jihadi emotions. अरे बाप रे, ये कहाँ से बोल दिया? Holy shit. Listen to this line once again. What the fuck? What the fuck? The movement for the creation of Pakistan was not based on religious extremism or jihadi emotions. तो फिर अलग देश काहे को चाहिए था? Again, without citation, randomly बोल दिया. But jihadist Islam aims at transforming Pakistan into an orthodox theocratic Islamic state at the expense of using violence contrary to the creation of Pakistan. What the fuck? But as long as the military establishment is unwilling to dissociate itself from domestic politics, the cult of jihad and Islamist influence will remain as persistent factors in Pakistani politics. The more the military searches for domestic legitimacy and more it plays the Kashmir card, more is the possibility of Mullah military alliance of expediency. However, Mullah military alliance must not be used as a magic formula for the success of Pakistan's internal and external policies. Yes, they use it as a magic formula and therefore have almost destroyed their country today. This alliance promotes and justifies jihad, which has been used for regime survival, extort more international support, and managed domestic crisis. In the post 9/11 period, Pakistan's potential radicalism rests more on the degree to which a militant anti-Western vision becomes conspicuous among the Islamists than it does on the degree to which Sharia is implemented. Religion in itself has not been the discernible factor behind the growth of jihadism in Pakistan. Acha. Because majority of Pakistans have been influenced by liberal Islam. का क्या evidence है ये बोलने का? Rather the policies of the जब भी कोई भोसरी का claim करना पड़ता है वो without citation ये दे के निकल जाता है यहाँ पे. Rather, the policies of the external powers like the US and Saudi Arabia have had its definite impact on shaping a jihadist mindset. Islamization process imposed one specific reading of Islam, the puritanical Wahhabism, which provided fertile ground for the growth of fundamentalist forces. This was in contradiction with the humanist tradition of Sufism and brought internal disunity. अच्छा, इस scholar को संजय दीक्षित के साथ छोड़ देना पड़ेगा 10 मिनट के लिए. At present, inside Pakistan, jihadi ideology holds the key to religious extremism and terrorism. Islam, as any other ideology, can therefore be radicalized or moderated depending on the political ambitions and motivations of the actor. ये kind of true है. If someone really honestly does not want to do jihadism, then of course they might have different results. One of the emotive explanations behind the radical sweep in recent times has been the anger within the Muslim world against the perceived social injustice. अरे ये premise तो दिया है मार्क्सिस्ट ने. Western attempts at resolving the problems of the Muslim world must accompany major concessions. concession देना है that would help remove these perceptions of injustice. अरे तो perceptions of injustice हो रहा है क्योंकि तुम पेपर लिख रहे हो injustice के बारे में. मत लिखो. Failure to do so will create a new generation of radical Muslims wedded to jihadism. अच्छा अच्छा उसका गलती है यूएस का. Defeating jihadist Islam in Pakistan would require the dismantling of the Military-Madrasa-Mullah complex built around the concept of jihad. State patronage has systematically transformed Pakistani madrasas from an intellectual to politico-religious institutions. Religious indoctrination through madrasas as a part of the jihadi cult must be checked by secularizing madrasa education. Unless this is done, the indoctrinated minds are bound to develop an abnormal psychology responding more favorably to the ideological appeals of jihadism. There is the need to portray madrasas as the legacy of great scholars, not of Wahhabi mullahs. Great scholars, acha acha. Great scholars who did not hate kafirs, ऐसा कहाँ से मिलेगा? The military leadership must end its patronage to mullahs, which has enhanced their religious zeal, their sense of intellectual superiority, and credibility as salesmen of the supernatural. That apart, promoting and strengthening secular democracy would go a long way in preventing the subordination of Pakistani decision making to military biases, particularly in the sphere of foreign policy. This would indirectly prevent the use of jihad as an instrument of state policy. No halfway approach or playing a double game in tackling radicalism would help Pakistan. It would rather leave Pakistan vulnerable, जो कि आज हुआ है, to pressure both from the Islamists and the international community led by US. और ये हुआ इस पेपर का खात्मा. Thank God. Oh. 23 viewers even now. Okay, let me check some comments and then we will end the live stream. Are liberal Islam Jinistaki, what is it? And he has not given any citations for those claims. Randomly बीच में कभी बोल दे रहा है कि no, there's something different, there's a different kind of jihad, different kind of Islam. कुछ भी लिख दिया है. पाकिस्तान ऐसे ही बन गया. Yes, the author is on drugs. Al-Beruni. Okay then. Thanks for joining the live stream, guys. Tomorrow we will discuss something else. Let me think what we will discuss. I have not decided yet. Thanks a lot for joining the live stream, guys. Good night.